They'll post all presentations will be posted. All the detailed project will be posted on the departments.
So, by the time you get home, hopefully, this morning I uploaded, what's called the PAD virtual binder, and I'll send you a link to that. It'll be on the planning board website.
But some of them will still come in. There'll still be some.
So there's what's called Schedule 4, which is detail of every project that you won't have in this binder.
That's just a financial piece of it. Specific for the grant, so the whole.
I'm not in the way.
Detail of every project.
Yeah.
I saw her.
Oh, did you? That's okay. Description of the project and all the financials.
Okay, that's
Well,
Well, we'll probably be working on more of the higher level.
first owner has.
all right, that's all. That's all. Thank you so much.
That are, yeah.
Cindy, are you ready? Are you ready? Board ready? Board ready? You ready? Already. Mike, we're gonna start. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And, welcome to, another year of capital budget, discussions. And, as always, it's long and hard and extremely detailed. And, I'd like to, recognize Councilwoman Elson Picard's in the room, and, Councilman Pruski's aide David is in the back there, so, any of you have questions of either of them, you can get them on break or in your free time. So what I'd like to do, is, all of you were distributed the agenda, so I have not seen any corrections or changes. So I'd like to call for approval of the agenda. I move to approve the agenda as submitted.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So carried. All right, first up this morning is, Phil Hager was gonna make some, remarks from planning and zoning, but he has the flu, and I am glad he stayed home and not shared his wonderful, talk, with us. So, Cindy Carrier, will step in and make any remarks, from the planning and zoning office.
Yes,
Floor is yours.
I know he's sorry he couldn't be here, and I'm not as eloquent as he is speaking, but, I know he would want me to express, gratitude on behalf of our department and all the other county departments as you listen to our budget presentations over the next, 2 Fridays. I know they're long days, but it's sincerely appreciated, and as well as you move forward into thoughtful deliberations, making a recommendation to the county executive. So thank you.
Well, thank you, and I hope I know he's a 20-hour-a-day work guy, so he's not gonna be happy, staying home. Before we, start into, presentations, I just wanna reiterate with the board that our style is more of an open interaction. So we like to, ensure that no one board member hogs all the questions, and at least start with 1 or 2 questions, let other board members, ask a question before we come back to the second, third, fourth questions you might have. So the presenters will interact with us, directly. So, that way I won't be looking up and down the table to see who wants to, raise their hand in the chat, and it allows for a little faster process. So with that, the first, presentation this morning is, the budget office.
Okay.
There he is. There you are. So the floor is yours.
Okay, I'll kick it off. I'm Kurt Svensson with the Budget Office. I'll be with you
the next 2 Fridays and into the preliminary and final deliberations. I'm responsible for the capital budget and the office of the budget. Pooja is the assistant budget officer, and he, among many other things, deals with revenues, and he's the guy that kind of does the affordability analysis for us. So he's going to run through that, which is a key input, obviously, to how much we can afford to do on the capital budget. So we're going to start off with him, and then I'm going to run you through the binder, oriented to how the reports work and so forth, and then we'll get started with the departmental presentation. So Pooja Haseeb, we'll start.
Just for full disclosure, for those who don't know, I am also on the Spending Affordability Committee for the county. He's going to be speaking up here. Floor is yours, sir.
Good morning.
I'm sorry, Pooja. This up here, I should orient you first because this is what I'm going to be using for Pooja's presentation. On the being uploaded onto the Planning Advisory Board website is what we call this virtual binder, which is a few years ago we went from these huge binders with a ton of paper to these executive summary type binders. But all the detail, the summaries as well as the detail is in this virtual binder that's online. So we'll be displaying many of the pages up on the screen that maybe aren't in your binder. So we're just going to basically be following this. So I'm going to fire up Pooja's debt affordability here if I can get that nice straight. So what? All right, I'll make that work better for him. I think. Yeah, that's as good as it gets. But this is also in your binders under the background information tab, so you can follow along on paper with this. Sorry about that.
Okay. Go straight through the second page. When we look at the county's debt affordability, as most other jurisdictions does, we look at 4 important ratios, and that there we have listed the names of those ratios. First ratio, and very important ratio, debt service to operating revenue. And why we say it's the most important ratio is because this ratio indicates and reflects how much money the county has to pay day-to-day operations and how much money out of that day-to-day money to pay for debt service. And currently our guideline is 11.5%, basically 11.5% of our revenue can be used for paying debt service for the capital improvement program. And the second ratio mostly used is debt to estimated full value. This is basically estimated full value of real and personal properties of the county. And debt service, total debt divided by full value. Our guideline is 2%. Basically, this is wealth indicator ratio for the jurisdictions. And on the next, I inserted a picture. This is from Department of Legislative Services of Maryland. Updates this every year. Most recent one is fiscal year 2017. And basically there's 4 types of colors from if that's debt to full value less than 1% is very light blue, and we are in the second tiers between 1 and 2%. Currently our debt to full value ratio is 1.5%. We are on the second tier, and this gives you an idea where Anne Arundel County is in terms of debt to full assessment based ratio. Another guideline is debt to personal income. Rationale behind using this personal income measure is because it's a relative measure of a locality's taxable base. As you all know, in Anne Arundel County's revenue stream, roughly 25% comes from income tax. And that income tax, we already found very close and very strict relationship between personal income of the county. And this is another important indicator, another wealth indicator. And the last is debt per capita. This is Anne Arundel County's debt, how much debt per person in the county. Currently, our guideline is $3,000, and these ratios are pretty useful when you compare Anne Arundel County's affordability or Anne Arundel County's debt ratios to other jurisdictions, because you cannot just take our 1 billion to compare to 500 billion of smaller counties. But if you look at the ratio, you can sometimes tell how these jurisdictions is doing in terms of debt capacity and capital improvement, affordability, etc. And the next page, as I earlier mentioned, in here we listed the key guidelines and some numbers here. Basically, the first column shows you our new authority. Every year, how much new authority we had when we proposed capital budget. And if you look at 2002, we basically said 60 million. And it grew, and until 2015, we had 20-year bond issuance. Like we issue bond in a 20-year term. And we changed it in 2016 to 30-year bond, and that allowed us increase the authority by 25 million without raising the guideline. And the far right side, right-hand side, the debt service as a revenue ratio, still 10%, but we could do 145 million. Then starting 2017, is consulting our consultants and then bond rating agencies, and then we decided to raise that ratio to 11.5%, and we gradually raised our new authority to 163 million a year. And in the next page, this is very important information for you all. Debt service to operating revenue ratios, and I'm showing you roughly 14-year history. Starting 2006, which is 6.6% of our revenue went to paying for debt service. Now, in 2019, fiscal 19 estimated 9%, and you will see in the next slide that roughly 10% of our $1.5 billion revenue will go for paying for debt service. And just for your information, every 1% increase in this ratio, let's say from 9% to 10%, that means $15 million of our operating revenue has to be set aside for paying for debt service. And now, saying all of this, I just want to show you, this is our debt affordability model. We have a very complicated model, but this is a very user-friendly page of that. And in this, let's start with the top. Borrowing cost assumptions. Fiscal 2019, upcoming bond issuance, we assume 5% coupon rate or interest cost, but true interest cost is a little bit lower according to recent estimate, probably 4%, but we still issue 5% with some premium, because selling the bond with a premium is a bit easier to sell than selling a 4% coupon. In terms of bottom line for the county cost, the same thing. And we assume it probably go up to 5.5 next year, and in our model for the long term, we use 6%, and we don't have a crystal ball to know what the interest rate will be in 3-4 years from now, but we use 6% with the conservativeness of certain areas of this model, so we're comfortable. And as we update every year, so we're comfortable with going with 6%. And after going with 6%, if going with a $163 million bond authority each year, it's showing on the top, our ratios that affordability ratio here shown in this area, which is highest is 10.2, which is FY 2023, and all other ratios are below our guideline, which is good. That's good sign for the bond rating. And $163 million. I just did a quick math. Since last year, we used more authority than allotted for that one year. Total, I added up like $902 million. If you add all that 163 and then take out 76 million, which already used in FY19 budget, 900 million. I believe your capital budget here, this 902 bond plus some other revenue sources, 5-year program and one budget, probably your job is to working with those numbers. I'm sure that is one takeaway from this model, and that's the ratio. And as of today, that is the plan, $163 million needed. And if you have any questions, I'm here for a couple of minutes, and then I will turn over to Kurt.
Question on the, where's the concern level as a percentage that may worry us about our debt rate, our bond rating? Where's that number start to worry you in today's market?
Today, Mark, 11, and according to the consultants, that debt service as a percent of revenue, that ratio is most, we look at that ratio and most important one. If that ratio reaches to, let's say, 11%, 11.5 right now is guideline. If it's close to 11, probably cause some concern.
So we're getting close.
Getting close.
A thing to keep in mind here, Hujan was alluding to it about the, there is authorized but unissued debt authority, because, we authorize bonds, but for whatever reasons, things take longer than you think sometimes, okay? And we need to have the authority to issue purchase orders, but then we don't necessarily expend those funds, but over time. So we issue bonds in accordance with our true cash flow needs. We authorize bonds in accordance with our need to have appropriation authority in order to initiate purchase orders and get things moving. So there's always this big authorized but unissued amount. It's not shown on the simple model, but it's in the detail of the model. One of the key parts about our conservative nature of this is that we assume in this model that all of that authorized but unissued debt authority is issued in the next year. That never happens, but we assume it to be conservative. And then what's authorized for 20, we assume gets issued the next year, and so forth, and on. The point being that because of that those conservative assumptions, as well as being conservative about all the denominators there, the debt service estimates, the personal income estimates, and so forth, we're conservative with that. So the fact is, even if our model shows 10% for debt service of revenue, as that previous chart showed, we're only going to be at 9. Okay, so whatever we set as our guideline, as our whatever we peg on this model, in actual effect on the debt service one, we're going to be about 1 percentage point less than that. So that's a buffer there. And then the other thing is, we don't want to show 11 here because interest rates can change on us, and we don't want to necessarily have to go and respond accordingly in our plan because interest rates spike on us.
That was kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
But, and this board tends to look at the 6-year plan to be balanced, even though 1 year may be down because of whatever project, but it's really a 6-year moving managed product. Any other questions for you?
I have one question. The not used, could you explain that for me? The not used in prior year?
Not used.
Is there a carryover in regards to?
Yeah.
Authorized
Yeah,
by
yeah,
issue?
Yeah, I'll deal with that because it has to do with our
Okay.
planning
Okay.
process.
Mhm.
That not used in prior year is a function of the fact, is what the chair just alluded to, is we look at a 6-year plan, and some years are higher than others, okay? For a long time, we used to not actually approve projects in the first year of the budget to the level that we could afford, okay? So then when we roll forward to the next year, we needed to carry that over, as you said. And it would be a positive number when we carried it over, because if we didn't use $20 million of the affordability last year, we could add that to the number of the 163 across the board to be true to our assumptions of the previous year. We can't just say, okay, we made that assumption, now let's forget about it. No, we made that assumption. A few years ago, we caught up to that, and we're dealing with the bubble. So now we're actually in the process of the past couple of years, we've approved budgets that use more authority than the 163. So that's why the not used in prior year is now shown as a negative, because we're recognizing that we did more than the 163 last year. So that's why effectively our affordable authority for 20 is only 86.9.
So basically it's a process of right sizing previous.
Yes, recognizing and holding ourselves accountable to decisions we made last year. We either reap the benefits of not having used it all last year, or we pay the price for having used more last year. I mean, we've got to do that. Otherwise the model breaks down, and we would find ourselves in real trouble.
Yeah. And 4 or 5 years ago, this board suggested to the county executive and the council that we had some big projects that were actually they were just always kicked down the road. And so we recommended raising capital spending for 5 or 6 years and then bring it back down. Well, we're in that process of right sizing would be probably a good term. So it was kind of a planned bubble.
The planned bubble, but unfortunately, given all the needs, as we'll be seeing throughout this process, don't see that bubble going down very much. We're introducing new concepts that we'll get into later in the presentation called this, where we're showing you unfunded requests that we haven't shown you before, which kind of is to highlight the fact that this bubble isn't receding anytime soon. So, and that's something that we need to wrestle with in the coming years.
Kurt, one other question. I know we've enjoyed over the last number of years, because of the bond 20 to 30 year increase. We've enjoyed a lot of dollars that have been available. And your comment being conservative, when will you go from conservative to aggressive, and will that ever happen?
I think that the chart that you spoke to earlier, when we kind of showed the changes in the guidelines, I think that the changes in the debt service as a % of revenue is probably the best sign of the degree of aggressiveness that we're taking, and that we are.
11.5 is as aggressive as you can get.
I think that's what the bond rating agencies and market has said. Yeah.
When we consulted, why that number is not 12, like around, or 11? Because every half a point give us $7 million more revenue can put to work debt service. So they said 11.5 because they have some benchmarks. Why they're consulting? Because they have 300, 400 jurisdictions all data. So they know us a lot. So they compare us to a comparable jurisdiction, let's say in Ohio or somewhere, and some political environment. And then they said, guys, according to our judgment, 11.5 probably put you good spot so that your bond rating is still up. So we listen to that.
But in the spirit of John Hammond, if you were here, he'd say, but percentages don't pay salaries and don't balance your budget, dollars do. And
Bless you, John.
so while the rating agencies say you might be able to go up to 11.5%, well, what that means is $15 million for every one of those percentage points. If we are at 9%, we were at less than 7% a decade ago. We added 2 percentage points in the past decade, which means on an annual recurring basis, $30 million more of annual recurring revenues that could have gone elsewhere now has to go to debt service. That's getting aggressive.
Yeah.
And while the rating agencies say 11.5, I don't see our operating budget ever getting to 11.5.
See, every year if no revenue raise, new tax raises, new net revenue, ongoing basis, if the economy is normal, as usual, $40 to $50 million incremental revenue every year, 40 to 50 million. But without being any aggressive with these, our annual debt service about $8 to $10 million more than last year. So $40 to $50 million additional revenue, you're roughly spending about 25% of that to just pay for debt service. That's already put us at budget balance, a big challenge. So that's why we have to watch. If we increase at 163 to 173, and interest rate increases another percentage point next year, so that's 40, 50 million, maybe probably 25 million. We have to put in this. That's what we just watch again. That's why I keep saying the first ratio is a very important ratio, which is revenue as a percent of. And spending affordability report also available, and they 7 gentlemen sit down and they decided economy probably grows 3.7%. And there is some reason behind that. And 3.7 means 1.5 billion revenue only grow 4.5, 40 to 50 million incrementally. That's again true.
Okay,
So
thanks, Uja. So we can
Thank you.
continue on with it if there's no other questions.
oh
Yeah. Okay, so the next item here in your package, probably best to follow along on paper at this point. So we've finished up Huja's package. Now we're into the capital budget overview from the 2019 approved CIP. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because this is literally just ripped out of our approved budget book that's available online. And it's just giving you a basis of this is where we were on July 1, 2018. Let me get that up on the screen for you. Sorry. Yeah, so this is the presentation, very similar to what Huja was just showing you when you look in your binder. Huja's last slide looks very much like the first slide of the next presentation because that's what we showed in the budget book last year. And the ratios are pretty much the same. If you go to the next page, you'll see how we did in terms of what our actual use of bonds was. So we had these were our guidelines, our affordability, but we actually used 219 of bonds compared to the 143, and that gets us to that over of 76 million. That was the adjustment on the slide that Mr. Read your last name, Kendrick.
Faison.
Mr. Faison asked about that $76 million adjustment is to recognize the fact that we were over our affordability last year to that amount. So this is a key part of what this committee does in the interim and final deliberations is struggles with all those requests and tries to get the numbers down so that we are not, in the end, over affordability. On a cumulative basis. The next page just restates that debt affordability model, but it actually shows the debt as it is assumed to be authorized. So it's front-loaded heavily here, probably too much so. Last year, I believe during these deliberations, I was kind of starting to raise the point that only having $69 million in that last year isn't all that realistic, and we might need to start introducing a policy so that we don't end up having, 600 in the first 2 years and 0 in the last years. That's not a real true plan very much, is it? so we need to be a little more self-disciplined when it comes to spreading this out. But that's, again, part of the challenge that we're going to be confronting. The next page is just summarize the key projects. Basically, the 80-20 rule almost always applies, where 20% of the projects in your capital budget explain more than 80% of the spend. So if you just look at these projects, these are the projects that consume most of that general fund funding, and most of it will be spoken to today when the Board of Education comes here, because they consume the vast majority of the capital budget dollars that we have. Right and proper, I'm not saying it's not, but I'm saying that's the facts. The last few pages of this presentation, page 6 is what I'm on right now, and that's just showing the class-by-class breakout. But the part I wanted to call your attention to is on page 7. So this is the general fund class of general fund classes of capital projects and what the funding sources are. And you'll see here that general fund, the general county bonds line and the general fund PAYGO line are boxed out and highlighted for you, just to indicate that they consume the lion's share, or they provide the lion's share of funding for the capital projects. On the next page, you'll see that we do have a couple of other big ticket dollar items, and those are the Maryland Higher Education funding source for capital projects in the community college, and the IAC, Interagency Commission. They make the recommendations for how the school construction funding gets allocated. So those are two fairly big funding source assumptions that we have to make. And you'll see on the IAC one that we're talking about $35 million a year from them, from the state, to support our capital program. Just want you to keep that in mind for the next slide, which shows the current request that's before us. The only other line I wanted to speak to you with here was the bond premium. As Huja was saying, in the market that we have right now, we have been selling the bonds with a premium. That's what the markets are looking for. So how that represents itself is we have bond premium that a charter restriction requires must be spent as a PAYGO funding source within the capital program. So that's us recognizing that. So we plan for fiscal 20, $10 million in bond premium. In a couple of seconds, I'll be showing you the assumption this year is going to be, we're going to up that by $24 million, because we fully expect, given the information that we've gotten, that our bond premium is going to be $34 million next year for the sale that we do in a couple of months. And these are the other funding sources that we'll get into next week. Now, okay. I guess I will stick with the order. Let's, in your binders, I guess we have the section on impact fees. So let's deal with that a little bit. This is a new section here, stemming from, it's in your books right after the section I reviewed. It's not page numbered or anything. I'll try to blow it up here. What this is, this stemmed from a request from the chair, and the new county executive was very interested in determining what this number was as well, and that is, back in 2009, when the impact fee rates were last set, there was a lot of discussion. It took, actually the first bill expired, so we had to actually reintroduce it as another bill. It took so long to get done. But basically, whenever we increase the impact fees, there's an analysis report that is put together to look at what the true cost is in impact of development and what the rates would need to be to capture that full cost. So the Nicholas report showed these dollar amounts, and the bill that was passed after it was fully phased in, because the first 3 years really had discounted rates that grew over time, but the fully phased in rates are shown here. So when you compare the fully phased in rates to what the Nicholas report showed was the levels necessary to capture the cost of development, you can see that there's a difference where schools' rates are set at 90% of what they really ought to be, public safety 80%, and roads at a little less than 50%. We've talked about this over the years, about why there's pressure on the capital budget and so forth, particularly in these areas. But so the question was, what if we had not done that, and what if we had set the rates in Bill 7108 at the levels required to actually recoup the full cost of the development? So that's what the previous page does. It basically takes the actual collections that we saw in each of those districts, each of those road impact fee zone districts, and then adds them up, and then says, well, if that was what we got with rates set at 43%, you divide it by that, we wouldn't have collected 17, we'd have collected 39.9. Now, of course, there is an argument that says that if the rates were that much higher, that might have negatively impacted the level of development that would have taken place. So there is that argument out there. There's also the argument that that's more that development isn't all hinged on this particular cost element, that there's a lot of other market factors that probably very well would have overwhelmed that. That wouldn't have been enough to kick these developments out of business, if you will. We could argue till the day ends. So on that one, this analysis does not assume and does not take that into effect. So there is a recognition that this is a simple analysis in that respect. So that's what it would have been, and then if you subtract what it would have been from what we actually took, that's the foregone revenue amount. For the years from full phase-in to now. The years of phase-in, the rates were set considerably lower, and so it took a little more, and they were half-year rates. They changed in the middle of the fiscal year, so it made the analysis a little more difficult. But the same approach, the foregone revenue for those 3 years is shown here, and if you add them up, we're talking about $120, $130 million over this period of time of revenue that was not collected, that could have been collected to address some of the capacity needs that we are confronting today. So that's just a factual data display. What about it? Well, the horses are out of the barn. I mean, this is not income tax, property tax. This is a fee on a one-time event. The developments are done. It's not like property tax with the value is there every year. This is an event, and that event is now passed. So we can increase impact fees, but it's not going to. We start at zero every year with this funding source. Depends on the level of development. With property tax, we don't start at zero. We have properties with values. With income tax, we have people with jobs. This you start at zero. So anyhow, if anything, it just explains partially why we are where we are. Because even before this bill, the rates that were set, that this bill addressed, the reason why we introduced the bill was to increase and get the rates right. So they were, this analysis to go even further back and show a similar scenario. At that point, it just becomes analysis paralysis, what we're doing here, you know, so, but this is just to give it a sense. So I don't know if this got at what you were asking for.
It does, so you're saying, what is it, 127 million?
127 million
So it's
from
enough to
the,
build a high school. But it's not enough to build 5 high schools, so.
right. And the key thing to be aware of here too is that the lion's share of that money is related to roads. 100 million of that number is on the road side, because that's the rates that were set at less than 50%. The schools were at 90%.
I think I've heard some stuff talked about on roads around the county. Kurt, when did we, correct me if I'm wrong, impact fees were divided into 5, or set by councilmatic district?
No, not by
back in the
councilmatic.
beginning, and then
They were never a councilmatic district.
What? There's some district, and there's some.
They're broken up into zones.
Zones, that's the word, sorry.
Yeah.
So, didn't we have 7 and go to 5, or?
On the road side, there were 5 transportation zones.
Explain that.
Yeah,
Zoning thing.
I'm hoping, I don't think I have the maps on this.
Well, just an overview. So.
All right, well, I mean, I could show you the maps. There were 5, if I can on my laptop show you my maps, but I can't get my laptop up there for you.
Brandon County's website.
I have one color copy of it here, but.
So-
See that?
so roads have a
The
different
roads
number of zones
had
than-
5 zones, and to be honest with you, I don't know what the driving factor was for saying this would make a good road zone as opposed to this one. That roads are the dividing lines, but
It looks like the way the roads have got their road district set up.
maybe that was part of it. And this goes back to the
Yeah.
early 80s or the mid 80s before I was here. But and those districts have been the way they are from the beginning. Okay, now the important thing to keep in mind about these districts is that it doesn't really matter, because every year the Office of Planning and Zoning looks at the projects that are being requested and funded, and they make a determination as to which district will be benefited by that project. So if there is a project that is in the area of a boundary here, they can and do make a determination to say that 20% of the benefit of that project is going to come from this district here, even though the road may physically take place in another district. So we're able to use funds from another district for that road because of that determination that was made.
Who makes that decision?
The planning and zoning officer, in consultation with, on the board side, with information fed to them from the Board of Education, because the same thing happens with the Board of Education. If you've got a school whose feeder district crosses the boundaries of an impact fee zone, they provide that information to planning and zoning. It's objective information, you know, and this is what our feeder system is. This is how many students are attending this school that's being built. So they can do a defensible determination of that. So the fairness works its way in. We just need to have boundaries in order to have a starting point.
Well, the fairness is that any impact fees from development would mostly apply to the area.
Exactly, and that's what the districts do by default, but then we have this mechanism to allow for the discrepancies that happen around the borders.
But how many districts for school?
School, and that's where it gets confusing with councilmanic districts. There's 7 districts for school, but if you look at the districts, they aren't councilmanic districts.
There's 7.
There's 7 of them.
Okay.
Yes. There was a bill a few months ago to change it to 4, and that just didn't take into consideration the administrative and legal burdens that would have been created with, we have this process that I just
Right.
described, and to add those layers, it just would have created a nightmare from an administrative standpoint. So we backed off that and returned to the 7 originally.
Thank you.
Okay, so I just wanted to bring that up, A, because you had asked for it, and B, because it's a key factor in explaining why we have some of the backlogs that we have. And I think there's decisions being made at higher levels to make proposals to address this.
Yeah, I'll speak myself, not for my fellow members here, but it may be time to revisit all of the above
Yes.
impact fees across all the categories and all the zones, if you will. And a lot has changed since then. All right, any further questions?
So I have one discrepancy or even on, sorry, I waited too late to ask this question. His presentation previously was the first sheet, but then look at the second one on page 1. There's a variance between the population. Do you know why? Like one has for FY 2008, 589,017, and if you go, the other report has variance of 592,964. You see the variance? Population?
Yeah, like if you, the fiscal 20 estimate last year was 589,17, and now it's showing as 592,964. Yeah.
Is that recent between?
I can't speak for Hoosier, but I know that, I mean, these population numbers are estimates. They're based on ultimately they're based on census figures, I believe, but then there's assumptions about what the growth will be, and I don't know if they get updated every year by P&Z and that gets shared with Hoosier. I'm not exactly sure, but all of these denominators get revised each year. But I can get back to you with the next
And
one.
Let me, if I may respond, I believe they may come out of planning and zoning on adequate public facilities when they look at development and what's planned for them. They're updated on an ongoing basis, I believe, twice a year or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some talk about doing it quarterly. I think that's kind of a moving number.
It is, but actually this morning as I was looking at this, I meant to ask him myself, because it almost looks like it might just be off a year. And so I think it's a good question to ask him to make sure that didn't get, that maybe it needs to have been updated and it wasn't. It looks like the numbers are almost in line as if they didn't get rolled forward a year.
So we should say because it accounts for a value.
I'm sorry?
Because it's a metric, right? It accounts for a value.
Yes, yeah. And if any, in his presentation, the population estimates ultimately are lower than what the presentation was. No, actually, they're a little higher, aren't they? 24, 617 compared to 610. Yeah. So we'll definitely get back to you on that with the explanation and perhaps even correction. Wait, one thing I wanted to say at the very beginning of this, we are early in the process of the capital budget development process. And we come to this board at a time earlier than a lot of us are comfortable with. Okay? But it's good because we need the input. And it's also good because we share what our work products are before they're absolutely final, and we pick up on things, and it's very much appreciated. If you call us, hold our feet to the fire so that we can get it right before it's too late. Okay, thanks. Anything else?
This is just an aside about these fees. I was at a presentation and a developer, granted this is a developer speaking, did a comparison of building an office building in 3 different counties. I can't remember what they were, Baltimore County, Howard County, and Anne Arundel County. And just gave broad brush of the fees that they paid to place this building there. And the other two counties, you know, they were in the hundreds of thousands. In Arundel County, it was like 1.2 million. And I guess I don't understand how that, you know, here we're not even really fully charging, how that can be. And then he basically equated that to, that reflects about $1.50 per square foot in the rent that they have to charge their, you know, their tenants. And I'm a little bit mystified.
Yeah,
by that.
it's a struggle that you have across the board in making comparisons when you're comparing jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, because there are so many different ways of accounting for things and for charging for things that in one jurisdiction the costs are part of this fee, in another jurisdiction the costs are part of another fee. So if you take any one fee and try to compare it across the board, you can find discrepancies, you know, that can be explained because, oh, well, the reason why they had that fee so low is because they really recoup those costs in the form of this other fee. So that would argue for the approach that I'm guessing this person had taken, where they were not just looking at impact fees, they were looking at all of the fees. But again, were they looking at all of the fees, you know, or were there certain fees not being included that the other jurisdictions were actually charging? Or maybe the other jurisdictions are by their methodologies are spreading those costs across existing taxpayers. You really have to look at the details to get at that kind of thing.
An example that was presented to us in my discussion with Public Works is like Howard County compared to Anne Arundel is that, you know, we have the impact fees, but Howard County has a percentage on all services, sewer and water, that forward funds out of the public facilities where we have impact fees and we build and hope they grant. And so they build them and then, you know, they're built into the projects going forward. But that is a forward funding mechanism. I don't know, and it's on their water and sewer bill every month. So I don't know that that's fees.
It sounds like Chris,
from
DPW director,
Right.
who might be able to weigh in on that.
Yeah, so the common example to compare is Howard County to Anne Arundel County and the utility fees. So if you're a new connection in Anne Arundel County, you're spending, it's like $7,000 for a water connection, $7,000 for a sewer connection, for one connection. In Howard County, it's like $1,000. So if you do the math, if you're projecting that over an office building or a commercial complex, it adds up to real money. Now, the difference is, Howard County's making up that difference on what they're not collecting from the impact or that connection fee. They're baking it into the property tax base. So the typical homeowner is getting assessed an additional 8%. It's an ad valorem tax on their property tax that goes to the utility fund that subsidizes what they're not receiving on the front end from development is going on the ratepayer, the taxpayer, across the board. And it's a very effective way of raising the revenue, but you're getting a little bit from a lot of people that really aren't necessarily using those commercial complexes. So it's back to what Kurt explained, is how you raise that fee. And I actually did an exercise to see if we did that same thing and added an 8% ad valorem on all the county properties that are on water and sewer. And so we valued the valuation of those properties that are on water, sewer, and added 8%. We'd actually recover the same amount that we recover from the development impact fee. So it's actually an equitable way of doing it. It's just, how do you, we're getting the same amount of money.
Yeah, I don't know that
we're
it would
doing
be called equitable.
No, I mean,
yeah.
from the utility fund, it would be raising the same amount of money.
Right.
I'm not suggesting we do that. I think ours is more direct to the actual impact, that entity that's making the impact. So, but the thing about my colleagues in Howard County, they love it because that rate, or that revenue floats with assessed values of property, so it's always going up. With us, we have to force a change to the rate in order to get more revenue, so.
Thank you very much. That answers the question. Any further questions for the overview before we move on to the presentation?
And I do have some more I do have more things to touch on in the overview, important things that are gonna take a little bit of time, so
Well,
I gotta
okay.
speed into those, okay?
You have 6 minutes?
Yes. So the next section in your, after that one pager on the impact fees is a summary similar to the one I showed you for the budget, the approved budget in place. It's a page 1 of 3 document here, the FY 2020 departmental request summary. Don't need to focus on the bonds and pay-go, but on the board, on the page 3 of 3, under the interagency committee line, you'll see what the board's request assumes the state level of support will be. And that's significantly more than what the state has provided traditionally. And that has always been a concern that we have, that we can't assume more than we're gonna get. And if we're gonna fund those projects, then that means the county's gotta put up that money, okay? Now, with the Board of Education, this year may be a little different because the state is actually talking about, throwing a ton of money at school construction. And NACO, the folks that represent county governments, are saying, well, wait a minute, if you do that, that only covers about 30% of the projects, or 35% of the projects. So that means the county's gonna have to come up with 65, 70% more to just keep those projects moving, and that's gonna kill us. The Board of Ed's request consumes more bond authority than we can afford if that's all we did. So there's some concerns there across the state from the locality level of, that's great if you throw more money at it, but maybe you ought to think about changing the share formula so that when you call us a 50% share county, maybe you can change your eligibility rules so that we truly get 50% from the state, not 30, 35% from the state. And so there's hopefully movement in that direction at the state level, but we'll see. And I'm sure Alex can speak to that.
Because most counties can't increase their indebtedness.
No, right.
Including us.
Right. Well, for the reasons we just described.
As a percent.
Yeah. So that's just an ongoing concern. The bottom line here on page 3 of 3, that's the all funding source total of the departmental requests before you. On the next page, this project class overview section is a very important new presentation. You're familiar with Schedule 2, all of you except for Mr. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with Dave. Facem. Mr. Facem. In the schedule section, Schedule 2 is like our Bible, in the Planning Advisory Board's Bible. I always encourage them to almost take this out of their book and just have it with them as we go through the reviews, because you use it kind of as an agenda. As the departments come in, they've been instructed to address their projects in the order it shows up on Schedule 2. Schedule 2 shows what was in the program on a project-by-project basis, and then what the departmental request is on a project-by-project basis, and if there's any difference, it's highlighted, okay? So it's all-encompassing that way. Nothing's gonna get missed between what is being requested formally of you and what is in the program. What this project class overview does is just as important, if not more important than that, but it does it at a higher level. So let me explain this one, not so much, we'll skip past page 1, which is kind of a high-level overview, and let me just go through pages 2 through 13 of this report. Each project class has 2 pages. It shows you what I just described to you, the program amount for that class and the department request for that class, and shows the ups and downs by fiscal year for the 5 years that are comparable. Below that is an explanation or identification of the projects that explain those changes. So on this one page, you can see that in the general county class, these are the projects where a change happened compared to what was in the approved program. We reduced the amount in advance. I'm not going to get into the content. That's what the departments are going to address, is the content. But this is an overview in one page of what's happened on that class from a program to request basis. Underneath that is a kind of what I would describe as a first cut at categorizing all of the projects in a class. In the general county classes, those of you that have been through this process understand it's a hodgepodge class. There's all kinds of projects in that class, so it's kind of hard to break it out. But it's important to break it out because that total doesn't really have a whole lot of meaning unless you know that, well, 51 million of that $160 million over the course of the 6-year program before you. 51 million of that 159 is central services stuff that Christina was speaking to. And another 54 of it is IT stuff that the IT director is going to be speaking to, and so forth. And the same kind of categorical breakdowns are provided for the other classes. What this does as well is it goes back and shows what the past 6 years' funding was. So we're looking at the next 6 years, the budget in the 5 program years. So what we've done here is provided you with the 6-year history so that you can see what the annual average is by category for the past 6 years, the next 6 years, and the annual average for the 12-year span. It also shows a very important summary figure, which is there are unfunded requests. You may recall, I've always stated at the start of this process that the requests before you are really different. The stuff that you see from the boards, the Board of Education, Community College, and Library, they are presenting to you their total needs. That's what their charge is. That's what they're supposed to do. They're doing what they're supposed to do. The project requests that we've been presenting to you are what we believe is to be a suite of affordable projects. So when you're approaching the cut process to try to hone it down, we always try to emphasize that, remember, we've already gone through this and tried to cull out what we can. So please keep that in mind as you're doing this. Many years ago, and I've been doing this process many years, we used to just throw everything at you guys, just the same way the independent boards do. And I remember being visited by the chairs of those boards saying, "Why are you doing this to us? You know, do some preliminary analysis for us." You know, well, this year we're kind of it's a hybrid approach here. Okay, we are showing you the called out departmental requests on Schedule 2 and up above. But what we are also going to be sharing with you is some of the needs and things that have been asked by the departments that have been unfunded, okay? So that you have that sense of what is unfunded. So the citizens have a sense as to what is going unfunded, not just from the Board of Ed, Community College, and Library point of view, but from county government's point of view. So this is just summarizing it. The second page of each project class gets fairly specific about it. There are projects that were requested that didn't make the cut, and the departments will speak to those. Briefly, not as much as they would their departmental requests that are formally before you. And that's the key thing to remember, is that what we provide to you is an item. This is the charter. I can quote the charter to you. What the task is that the administration needs to provide to you an itemized list of requests, and that is what Schedule 2 does. And that's what we're asking the board, as in all years, to review and make recommendations on. We are providing for informational purposes the unfunded requests to give you a sense of context about the total need and the long-range requirements confronting Anne Arundel County government, so that you have that context. You oftentimes ask for priorities when the requests come to you. Well, here they are. We've got two priority bands, okay? Priority band 1, if it's in the departmental request, it's a priority. If it's in the unfunded request, it's a priority, but it's a second level priority, because what do we want to do? Yeah, well, we don't think there's something in the departmental request that we can't. It's a priority. It represents a prioritization. So that's that. Now, in a few cases, and we'll deal with these as we hit the departments. Coming up very shortly is the first one. Police will be touching on it, but it's more than police. It's police and fire as well. We have introduced the concept of funding placeholders. Okay? The Waterway Improvement Program has a funding placeholder project. The Fire Station Program has a funding placeholder project. This is where we have funds set aside in the program in a generic project called funding placeholder, because we don't know yet what it is specifically we're going to do. What is that next fire station going to be? Or is it even going to be a fire station? We've talked over the past years about the concept of EMS only stations and so forth. So as we look at those decisions and plan and study those things, just because we don't know the specifics doesn't mean we don't put money in the program for it. So we put placeholders in the program for it, and then so that when we do have those projects in mind, there will be some funding set aside for them, and we aren't starting at ground zero saying, where's the money coming from? So we've introduced a couple of funding placeholder projects for police and fire, and for transportation capacity projects. Those placeholders do not provide anywhere near the level of funding in the program to address all of the projects on the unfunded list. That's part of what needs to be studied in the upcoming year, so that next year this time we can at least have a few of those first projects specifically identified, so that we can get moving on a long-range plan to address it. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of this project class summary. So as we go through the department's presentation, I would ask that you remove from your binders the project class overview and the Schedule 2. And you can just shut your binder and be done with it. Okay? These are the two things that are going to be relevant for the departmental presentation. I'm going to have the detail page that has the project page, the funding sources and the phases and the brief description of the changes and so forth up on the big screen. It's in your electronic virtual only binder, but that's the 300 pages of paper that we don't have in your binders. They're in your electronic binders, and they'll be up here. So the departments will come before you. They may or may not have a little overview to share with you. If they do, there's a place for you to tuck that into your binder, or I will put it in the electronic binder. And then they're just going to march through the departmental requests and then speak to any unfunded requests that are in the project class overview. So with that, I think my overview is done. And only 8 minutes over. But I didn't check what time I started. I might have started a few minutes late too. Okay.
All right, thank you, Vincent, as always. The devil will always be in the details.
Exactly.
So here we go. The first class up is our wonderful police department, I believe. Chief Altemer's in the room someplace. There he is. Thank you for your service. You too. Gentlemen, the floor is yours.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and ladies and gentlemen of the board. It's good to see some friendly faces that we've seen before, and it's good to see some new faces too. So, as Kurt alluded to here in the last few minutes, I think this year for the police department is going to be kind of a natural pause to take breath. That alarmed me some. I'll be candid with you until I thought about the fact that I did it myself 3 years ago, and it was the right thing to do. If you recall, we had a top to bottom, soup to nuts study done of the police department, physical infrastructure, staffing infrastructure, across the boards. And as that was occurring, we paused and didn't submit any capital project requests. So this year, we're giving the county executive and the CAO the same pause that we took naturally 3 years ago. And as you look at it, if you consider the last 20, 25 years in the county, the fact that we have had substantive and concrete real projects in 4 of the past 5 fiscal years, we're doing great. So if you'll allow me to segue to that, I'll do it briefly to give you an update on where we are with the projects I know that are near and dear to your heart, because I could see the chairman chomping at the bit for me to tell him about the academy. So we're doing great. I heard from Mr. Phipps this week that we're probably looking at a June ribbon cutting for the academy now. If you look at the last year and how much rain we had, it has destroyed us from a construction standpoint. You know, the Bobcats are trying to dig holes to lay foundations to dig up those old bomb launching sites, and it becomes a swimming pool 3 days out of 5 in the last year. So it's been challenging for them to keep going. Everything's under roof now, so the rain and the weather is not affecting us as greatly. I go down about every 2 weeks and take a look. I'll tell you from my standpoint, having been a cop in this county 25 years now, it'll knock your socks off when it's done. It's looking great. So
we look forward to our tour.
Yes, sir. We'll get it done. Project the second that is well underway is our new CID facility. If you guys remember me talking last year and the year before about how our old CID facility had become a 1987 Yugo, and we were spending more to keep it running than was worth just putting money in. It was the big ticket item off the top of my head was $2 million just to limp us along for another year in the old facility. So the new facility, we had our first detectives move in this week. We're phasing move in over the next month or so.
Yeah,
A month?
third floor is already has some of our detectives in it. They moved over from the old CID to the new.
So from a ribbon cutting, totally open standpoint, we're looking about the same time frame as the academy, probably June-ish. Chris, am I about right on that? It's looking great. I will tell you that I've had so much feedback from the detectives and sergeants and lieutenants who work in the building. Again, we never thought we'd have anything that nice. It's beautiful, and we'll look forward to that tour as well. The final upcoming project that we're moving apace in is the public safety support complex that we're putting out back. It's where we intend to have extra space for all the guns we're seizing under the new laws, all our evidence that we have to maintain for 100 years in crimes against persons. We've been busting at the seams, so that new project, construction money is done deal, and we're moving apace on that. We'll be able to hopefully have our own forensics firearms lab in the next couple years that will really allow us to move forward and not be dependent upon outside agencies to get our very high priority shooting evidence taken care of and things like that. So great news. When I talked about 4 years out of 5, that's the kind of cool stuff we've been doing. If you look to moving forward, as Kurt alluded to, we're holding some places for stuff. I will tell you candidly that with the new academy project, from the moment that I got involved. We've been going after a new range down there. Budget life being what it is, we've never been able to get it in because it is a fairly large ticket item. There are gradations of the type of range. I'll tell you that the neighbors in Davidsonville kind of beat on me every time we shoot at a weird time, and they have to deal with the noise of the shooting. So one end of that spectrum is a fully enclosed, soundproofed range that would make everybody happy down there. That's like a $22 million item, all the way down to redoing what we have now, which I think is in the 5 to 7 range. I will tell you, the reason that we were pushing this year is because we have had some catastrophic failures on the range. The good news on that is when that happens, nobody's been seriously injured. The good news is when we see a failure, even with this placeholder, we can hold the line for a year or so, because we just do emergency expenditures of $50,000 or $100,000 to keep it limping along. So that'll be in there as a big ticket item placeholder moving forward. Everybody sitting in here knows the woes of the population in West County getting greater and greater and greater. So one of the things we're trying to do is we put more and more cops over there and more firefighters over there to look at a fueling station. That one's fairly mid-range ticket item in the 7 million range. And then another placeholder that's gone into effect is, if you looked at where half of our SWAT equipment, special operations equipment, was being housed, it was being housed in a facility up on B&A Boulevard in Glen Burnie that the Board of Education has expressed some interest, strong interest in obtaining. So it looked 6 months ago like we were going to lose our ability to use that, and we needed more space, climate controlled, secure space to keep equipment that we use on extraordinary police events, and then also some traffic safety equipment that's delicate to use for reconstructing fatal accidents out there. So that's become a placeholder as well. I understand that the discussion is going to continue about whether the board is going to take that building over, so we can hold our own until that happens, and we'll be able to take a look at it. You've heard me talk before, I think, about a combined 911 center. It's become the industry standard. I have been pushing very hard for it.
I'm sorry, just to make sure that folks know, the chief's speaking to page 5 of 13 on the project class overview page.
So that's a pretty big ticket item. If you look at the bottom of page 5, as Kurt's talking about, you'll see scenario A1, A2, and A3. So really what the administration is trying to do is take in that macro data that we've thrown at them and look at what the project should look like moving forward. So there's an option to create a combined police headquarters, fire headquarters, and 911 center. That's a pretty big ticket item. I think 40 some million at the top end of that. It would provide new headquarters for both agencies, plus a new 911 center that is state of the art. There's a industry standard across the nation that really allows the public safety dispatchers, versus being fire and police centric, to look at what calls coming in. Oh my Lord, I have a choking child. Type choking child in, and the protocols pop right up on the screen to tell the dispatcher how to help the person until we get there. Okay, turn the child over, give them 5 sharp blows to the back, things like that, all the way through robberies, house fires. Pretty cool concept. Pretty. Also text to 911, new generational stuff. Pretty cool stuff to bring us up into the 21st century. So that's upper end. Midline could be some sort of combined headquarters building with a 911 center somewhere else. And then we have a 5th district on the plan, and we are eminently satisfied for it to be an out-year project. It has been in our mindset a 5 to 8 to 10 year project. We know the county's growing, we know the needs there, but we want to do it right because we're only going to get one shot at it, and we don't want to mess up our staffing ratio from extant staffing versus what new staffing do we need. We want to really get that right. We had what I would have to call a failed experiment on this 6-7 years ago that did not work well, and as time went on, they had to pull back from it, so we don't want to do that again, we want to do it right. So we're very comfortable with it being an out-year project. And that is about it. I'll be glad to take questions. Sir?
Do you know where this combined center would be?
So there has been a study that puts it right next to police fire headquarters, in between animal control and police and fire headquarters. The thought there is to keep it a public safety campus. That would free up a lot of space in our current headquarters building for our growth. I'll tell you that if you talk about body cameras, which has been a really viable discussion lately, I need a staff of 6 and all the equipment that goes with it for daily redaction of PIA requests, officer privacy issues. So there's going to be marked growth of staffing and space need even with that one project, and we've got 30 or 40 different projects that could take up that space in police headquarters, so we really wouldn't have any wasted space. That's one option. I think there's some lease options that have been discussed, but I think those are lower end, less support projects if you think about it. And then I think the discussion still needs to be had about what we might be able to do up in that VLT lottery impact area, the video lottery terminal impact area, the casino area, and how do we leverage some savings for the general fund out of the VLT monies if we put a facility of some sort up there also.
Would that be the 5th district?
No, I'll tell you, I'd really like to take fire headquarters as the 5th district. It is perfectly centrally located. If one of these projects takes off that vacates that building, it would be minimal refit money and geographically perfectly located and then close to headquarters, which makes stuff easier there. But if you look at our Eastern District, the 5th District would be central, so we'd steal parts from Eastern and Northern, Western, and Southern, and it's really centrally located even within the district. So I'd love to be able to do that.
On page 5 of 13, that number for the 5th Police District, the $3.3 million number, that number is predicated on the assumption that under the scenario that the chief just outlined of taking the fire.
So we were between 8 and 12 million on the last district. This shows refit money instead of new construction. Sir?
Can you prioritize the placeholder items, what you feel is the most important?
Yes, sir. So for me, because we've hit terminal velocity on that range, the range would be number 1 for me. We have had an unfortunate incident where a person got injured down there. We fixed that problem. A round got out of the range. We're cobbling together fixes. You can do it for a year. I can't do it for 5 years, if that makes sense. And it's a high liability issue. So clearly that's one. And then if you're looking at 2, that Special Operations Center is very important, but only if the board takes that property that they're in. So that's beyond my control. If that occurs, I can't have some of the equipment sitting unsecured that needs to be secured, so that would be 2. And then the 911 center is huge for me. I attrit a horrifying rate of dispatcher, call taker employees. Their workspace is, while it gets the job done, it is not a pleasant place to spend the 12 hours I force them to work 3 times a week down there. So that's a biggie for me too, as a leader moving forward. And I would say that even if we were to decide to build just a 911 center, I could live for 5 or 7 years without the rest of it. But that idea, that concept for me, the 911 center, is probably 3, and it's only 3 because I'm bleeding so badly on the other 2 issues, if that makes sense.
Also, 5th District, can that be funded totally with the VLT money?
So I think the 3 mile rule, which is not a law, but it's a rule for the people who decide how to spend the money, believe in that 3 mile rule. So if I was going to try to do it, that's a little left of center for me to want my central district, if that makes sense. North, south, east, west. It's a bit too far north and it's a bit too far west for me. If you look at the center line of the county when you think of the map, somewhere between the northern end of Crownsville and Old Mill would be the sweet spot, and that's why I love that fire headquarters building, because it is smack dab in the middle of it.
Chief,
Sir.
quick question, on the, range overall, so you said that the, range is high priority, when you look at cost, it's just as expensive as the combined facility. But the question is can the range, is this a total cost of the range? Can this be a first phase? Have you guys thought about like a first phase, second phase for the cost? For the
So
range?
I think short answer is we've thought about it. If you keep doing the analysis on the money spent versus the money we need to spend to get there, over fiscal years, we could do a refurb on what we got now. Probably it'd be several $million to get us to a place of real health. But I don't think you could take it fiscal year by fiscal year to do that. And I understand the question. It's a great question until you go down there and see what we're talking about. It kind of all, the space all has to be done at one time. And if you look at what the impact is on our operations for phasing and prolonging the period of time that we can't use a range, I have that range getting used every day by us, the sheriffs, the detention center, and truly other counties, other jurisdictions come and borrow range time from us. It is a huge operational blow to have a protracted period of time to not be able to train. Sir?
How long, excuse me, go ahead.
How old is the range?
1996, and there has been no real substantive overhaul there, and I gotta tell you, we should have an overhaul every 3 to 5 years, and that's why we have the failures that we're having now.
Chief, I think you've answered this before, but I'm going to ask it again. That range is shared by, as you articulated, various agencies, including DC and some agencies out of the district.
Yes, sir. We have a bunch of federal
And,
agencies.
So where's their kick in?
That's a good question. I've discussed it with the FBI. I've never gotten a whole bunch. Let's say I put the bait out there. I haven't gotten a bite on it yet, but certainly if the administration wanted to open those discussions, we could have that discussion. Here's the downside to that. If you let people help you pay for it, they have to be able to decide partly when they come. Does that make sense?
I don't totally concur with that, but I hear you.
So I would love to get some outside help. It's a concept that we have talked about, truly.
I'm sure you've asked nicely, maybe we need to.
That's a good way to say it. It's a good way to say it.
And, so even if you participate at whatever level, whether it's scheduled or one in your own time, then that is still a cost to pay.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you. I think there's an opportunity there for us to assist this cost.
Yes, sir.
Very difficult.
I would welcome the help.
Any further questions from the board?
One more question.
Yes, sir.
On your West County fueling station, is there any calculations on the amount of money that would be saved having these cars that currently drive to a further fueling station and back versus what this doesn't seem like a lot of money. $600,000. Are we going to say $200,000 or $300,000 if they're not driving back and forth? Or?
So certainly over time, you're going to save that without a doubt. Fuel costs, which we're not talking about driving Ocean City, but there's a cost there, right? I'll tell you what. So to answer your question, I don't think we've drilled down that far financially. I'll tell you that operationally, it's huge. You know, when I have a Laurel car out at the very western extremity of the county who has to drive back to Western District, 10, 15 minutes away, times 2, that's a post I have without a cop in it for 30 minutes, times however many a day, times 365. It matters operationally, and that's why we pushed it really hard. And you know, we've put new cops in Laurel. Some of our new positions have gone to Laurel, and the firefighters are having to invest more in West County also because of the growth. So to answer your question, sir, we haven't drilled down that far. Certainly there's an operation, or there's a cost associated, a savings associated there on fuel costs and time, but operationally it's huge.
And that's the type of thing that's going to be taken into consideration as the plan for the use of the funding placeholder in the near term. So it's just, I think there's
One last question.
Summarized it well with the odds.
It's something from past years, home alarms. When you articulated the number of calls you get a month or a year, I was blown away. And the fact that 98% of them are fake, or they're faulty alarms. Can you bring the board up to date on, because that equates into, I did some math, it was like a huge number of officers being dispatched to go to a home because somebody didn't do their alarm.
You would not believe how many irate calls I get.
What is the number of calls that you get now? And
So,
what percentage of
just
calls?
alarms or macro total calls? We're over 500,000 a year on calls. I don't have the number in my head on alarms, but I would say that 90 to 95% of the alarms, and 95 is probably the right number, end up not being an intruder, if that makes sense. Whether it's the wind caused it, or Junior came home and forgot the code, or a bird flew into the window,
Or bad installation.
Right. And then I got to tell you, it is a constant fight for me, because we find for subsequent false alarms, and you wouldn't believe the vitriolic stuff that I've listened to for people not wanting to pay the fine because you don't know, nobody tried my door, that type of stuff. But it's a big number, and we still have an active false alarm policy and program that finds people.
So it is the financial, there is a recurring, a recovery.
Yes,
Is it
sir.
adequate?
You have to register your alarm.
But is it adequate? Do you charge people for, after
the first.
After the first bogus alarm from their system, you charge them?
And I think it's gradated after that, if that makes sense. So your first one might be 50, your second one's 100. Don't hold me to those numbers, but that's kind of how it works. And you'd be amazed how many businesses laugh at us when we tell them, you're getting charged for this. And the big businesses say, it's factored into the national budget. It's unbelievable. It's an exercise in frustration. Yes, sir.
One more, I know we're running close on time. Baltimore County just had to spend $34 million on guns. Are we okay in our gun situation?
We're better than Baltimore County. I'll tell you that.
That's an open-ended question.
Yeah. As the guy whose job it is to keep the cops and citizens safe, that should have been acted on long before it got acted on in Baltimore County. We're just transitioning back to 9mm. We have had a problem with the 6 Sauer 9mm. To the point that it has caused me not to have faith in the weapon system in the long term. So we're transitioning as we speak from 6 Sauer to Glock. There's a lot of savings that we've leveraged. So when you look at, I think our estimate is it might cost us $130,000 as an emergency application. That's not going to break the bank. In fact, we've leveraged a lot of savings to help us move forward with it. 9mm, the FBI Firearms Laboratory is the think tank for guns in the world, for law enforcement. I personally went there and got a presentation from them where they convinced me it's time to go back to 9mm. We migrated to 40 caliber 25 years ago because the technology in the 9mm rounds wasn't there enough for them to perform like they should for law enforcement. In that intervening 25 years, we've gotten there. So the FBI has gone to back to 9mm. We're transitioning back to 9mm, and we should have everybody in a Glock instead of a SIG by end of March.
And that's an operating budget.
Yeah, it is an operating budget. So, and that'll keep us going. It'll be somebody else's problem before we have to worry about guns again, because that'll be long.
Okay, board, any last questions? Chief, as always, thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
Deputy Chief.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Be safe.
Have a good day.
What'd you do for us? And a quiet one in the back. Let's take a 5-minute break as we transition to the Board of Ed. you guys call out and then your process.
It's absurd.
No, I thought that was here.
Cindy over there.
Cindy here. Right now, thank you.
Well,
Is this a
I just don't know how to pronounce it. And I'll see if I can use a spot. I know, I just don't, this is the computer.
You didn't fall.
My laptop
No,
doesn't
I
have
won't fall saying that.
I don't know how.
Well, if I had to go to work, but I didn't want it because I'm.
I'll make it safe. Give it a shot. See if we blow it up. And it's not my laptop. You can send it.
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks. Appreciate it. So, I'm not the well, you deserve
This is the computer itself, so I'm thinking it's plugging in.
you get something wrong with your
That is
phone.
just. Probably, I don't know.
I was there a couple years ago.
Oh, okay. So you don't know.
He said, I can drive it or you can drive it, I can show you the keyboard.
Okay.
No, it's right. I know.
Oh, no, I had that on my toes.
Oh, my God.
I was gonna say we could do hand signals.
Yeah. Takes a while. Trying to do the same step.
I know, I was just gonna say,
Hey, it's me. Hello? Who is this? Is this Cisco?
Get on the bus.
Hey, it's Mike.
It might be hard for you to drive.
You guys have this on?
Yeah, to see when you're driving.
I know.
There's only one person on the backside. Oh, so I don't count probably? Well, one time there was two.
Good friend, Sean, the old man.
But I will sit over this way, so I can see.
Well, Gary said he was with us too. Why are we doing it if we're the only ones watching? But it sounds a little low. Alright, see you later.
Oh, just to use it.
That's the way I do it.
You effectively shield. You don't know the value of it.
Little boy and dog. Because the dog loves it.
Love this sketch. Just like that. They'll be following along this. You stick with this, that's a song. And then a little car. Doing with this is fun, it's just, they following along with this.
I will.
That's good.
You want me to read it out?
I'm just saying, but
My mother did so he had no life code watch. He had grandma code watch.
this is the form. They're good.
No, they didn't. It was just adults.
All right, all set? All right, let's reconvene. Welcome to Department of Ed. I'm not sure I know what to do. I knew there'd be a day we'd go through the budget, Alex wouldn't be here, but I just wasn't prepared. But I'm not trying to suggest that's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying it's just been a stable. So, welcome, Board of Ed. The floor is yours to take us through the projects and who is replacing Alex's presentation.
I'm Lisa Seaman Crawford, Director of Facilities.
I'm Kyle Rupp, Supervisor of Planning, Design, and Construction.
Speak up.
Certainly.
Speak up because we're being streamed.
Something new. And Alex sends
Something
his
great,
apologies.
actually. I think it's great.
He sends his apologies. He's down testifying downtown on a proposed bill that may not be favorable. So he may end up whipping in here in the middle. We're not sure. So.
Well, sure we'll get through it.
Yes.
As in years past, the board has a presentation for you all, but I do want you to know that on page 21 of 27 of Schedule 2, that's the projects they're speaking to. You have page 21 of 27 on Schedule 2 is our way of looking at things, but they have a presentation that covers all of this stuff, so I think we're fine just relying on their presentation, okay? It ties out, I've done the checking on all that, but if you want to kind of be following along with our way of doing things, you can.
I would just like to make a comment. I failed to do that in the beginning as a point of order to make sure everybody has their cell phones on silent, please. Please continue.
Thank you.
The floor is yours.
Good morning. Our FY20 capital budget is for $172 million. It's divided into three categories: major capital projects, which are new construction, renovations, additions; reoccurring projects, they're smaller scale projects that come right out of our comprehensive maintenance plan that we do yearly; and then off-site projects, which is our sidewalk that we partner with Department of Public Works and work on sidewalks to reduce the amount of buses and or eliminate buses by providing sidewalks closer to schools in the community. To orient you for this, the blue bar across the top gives you our request for FY20, which would be $11 million, and then it's broken down into county request and then a state request. Over 10 years ago, it was mandated to have all-day K. We're still plugging. We put relocatables everywhere, and now we're plugging through and trying to get to every school that was not built with proper kindergarten rooms, sizes and/or enough of them. We have about 5 left to go after this year. This year we're going to be looking at Millersville Elementary School that was built in the 60s. So it was never intended to have full-day kindergarten. And we're looking to put 4 classroom addition there and a 6 classroom addition at Lindenham Elementary School. For our addition project this year, it's Crofton Woods Elementary. I know everyone's aware that the Crofton area is exploding as far as enrollment. So we're going to be adding some classrooms to Crofton Woods, and we're also getting the remaining state balance of funds for Solly Elementary that is under construction right now. George Cromwell, a lot of this project will be familiar from last year because we had asked for initial construction funds, and now we're asking either for the second year or the final year. But with George Cromwell, it is the final request for this project. It's been going on for over a year. It's a phased occupied project. And we do list the current state rated capacity and when it's complete, and state rated capacity, it's our way of saying how many kids we put comfortably into that school. Edgewater, we received funding last year, and we'll be requesting our second year of construction funding. It too is a phased project. It started in October, and we plan to be complete by school year 2021. Tyler Heights also was funded for construction last year, and it is a phased occupied construction project scheduled to be complete in 2021. Richard Henry Lee, the students have been relocated to Corcoran Middle, and we are, I shouldn't say blowing through that project, but we are moving quite quickly with that project, and that will be scheduled to be complete in the year 2020 because it's unoccupied. It's a lot easier to get in there, get the project done, complete, and then move the kids back. It's a very, very small site, so that was the reason we couldn't keep the kids there. The next 3 requests are for feasibility study and design funding. Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot Crofton. We will be requesting additional funding. As you can see from the blue bar up above, the county funding is reduced, and we're asking for $23 million in state funding. But we are moving along very well with that project, as you can see, and we're on schedule to open in the year 2020. Yes. And sent into our feasibility and design request, we have Porterfield Elementary School. It was built in 1969. And we've done little or no renovations to this school over the years. It's had a roof, some window air conditioner, and an electrical upgrade. But other than that, it's been pretty much the same school since 1969. Hillsmere, very similar to Porterfield. We're requesting feasibility study. It was built in 67. Same minor upgrades, window air conditioning, some roofing work, some boilers. But one of the things that you'll notice on this one that you didn't notice on the rest of them, the SRC is actually going down when we're completing this project. That is because there's a charter school now open in the city of Annapolis. We've done some redistricting. We're increasing Tyler Heights capacity, so we don't need to build the school as big as it is right now, so, as far as number of students. Rippling Woods, we're asking for feasibility study and design funding. It is in the flight path for DWI, so I'm sure when we do the feasibility study, most likely it will be a replacement because it is in the flight path. and, it's quite costly. We do all the, sound abatement for an existing facility, so. It also is an open plan school, one of the last open plan elementaries, which is no walls between classrooms. We have office style, but in this day and age, safety and security, that's not a very comforting thought. And the big news is we're asking for funding for the Old Mill West High School, which would be located on Papa John's property. So we are looking at, using the prototype from Crofton, so it will be a very similar footprint. So that will save us in design funding. We've built it once, built it recently. We know where all the change orders are, so we can correct that the next time around. Reoccurring projects are requested for $53 million. The first is health and safety, and this covers fire alarms, structural repairs, other safety-related projects. And we've also included funding for replacement faucets because we're going through the water testing in all of our schools, which was complete. And we have all the results in. So any of them that tested positive for lead, we are replacing them. Security, our request is for $7 million. It includes AI phones, replacement cameras, security vestibules. We've been doing those all along, where you walk into a school and you're kind of in a holding area before you can get into the rest of the facility. So we've been moving through most of it. We started with the high schools and then we're moving into some of the elementaries, but eventually we'll get through them all. Building system renovations. These are projects that are funded with 50% from the state, and they include replacement of HVAC, roofs, controls for the HVAC system. And so we're requesting the second year of funding for the HVAC project at Annapolis Middle School and a roof project at Maryland City. Annapolis Middle School has window shakers, but not every area of that school is air conditioned. There's a couple of internal spaces, a mini gym and mini cafeteria that do not have air. Maintenance backlog, that's our area that we work with our comprehensive maintenance plan. It could be a window replacement project, asphalt replacement projects, concrete. We do repointing of brick, all kinds of floor replacements, changing carpet to tile. So we cover just about everything in that. We can put in main electrical, replace main electrical for school septic systems, things like that. So that's our catch-all category. Roof replacements, we're asking for $3 million. We can't get all the roof replacements done under systemic line items, so there's always one or two that we try to accommodate.
Listen, you just said that number 4 included roof replacements. You wouldn't be double the
no, we'll
just explain the difference.
Yeah. For the building system renovations, that's the state contributes 50% of that total, and we can't get as many roofs as we want through that system fast enough. So we also have a roofing replacement category too. So we do some under both. One gets state funding and one does not.
Is that category of state contribution potentially increasing this year with the capital you're talking about for school? They're increasing, state's talking about increasing.
Oh, right, the
capital
overall funding.
for schools. Would this fall into that?
Well, they would just fund our total request. When we get to the very last
That's my question is there going to be more state money into this roofs?
Right, we wouldn't be asking for any more than what we're asking right now for this year. When we get to the end, you'll see our total request from the state is like $53 million. And right now, they're only telegraphing that they're gonna give us, what, 35.
Well, that's normal, 35.
Right, so if
Mid-30s
they-
is normal,
right.
All you're gonna get, no matter what you ask for.
Right, well, we're hoping that with the additional funding, that 35 may jump up to maybe 40. We hope. You always can hope.
But that jumps to 5, we have to find 10. All right.
Right, exactly. Or half of the 20.
The systems renovation project, we like that one because that one we get closer to 50% match
Yes.
on. The other ones we get 30-something because of all the ineligibles.
But we can't let
built into it.
the roofs fail because
Right. So
we
that's
can't get
what-
it through there fast enough.
All of these projects, with the exception of a few of them, Systemics being one of them, and we can maybe highlight it as we go through, are 100% county funded, unless otherwise indicated. Systemics is a state funded one, so we only include projects that are participating in the state funded program in that project. Okay. Anything that's all funded by us, like extra roofs that we gotta take care of, fall under these other categories.
Security, which the state does.
Has
Yeah.
a grant in it, so.
That's a kind of a one-time grant, not an ongoing program.
One-time grant, right.
Relocatable classrooms, we are still, we're not buying new ones, but we're moving them from areas where we've maybe completed an addition or either a kindergarten addition or regular addition, and we're moving them to other places where there's increased enrollment. So we continue to do that. Asbestos abatement, where most of it is floor tile, and so we'll go in and we'll take the floor tile out in the summer and replace it with regular vinyl tile. So we do that routinely until we get all of our schools complete. Barrier-free, we can be enlarging doors, creating bathrooms, providing sidewalks, ramps. In general, most of our schools have access, at least one way of getting it in, but we do go back and do some more, whether it's a locker renovation or things like that to make them. School bus replacement, it's the cyclic replacement of our school buses. They only last 12 years, and so we go through replacing those every year. Health room modifications, we work with the Department of Health, and they provide the priority list of our schools which need health room renovations. So we work with them, and then we complete them.
Could you possibly answer these health room modifications, the new state requirement? Well, I shouldn't say new, it's been around now for a few years, not many. What's the square footage of that? What's that template look like approximately now?
Well, we're in the process of working with the state, all the counties about, there's an EdSpec work group up at the state. We're looking at that, trying to reduce the size of these health rooms because they are quite large at this point in time. And I don't know.
I mean, can you ballpark, is the size of the
I'd say at
classroom?
least, yeah, oh yeah.
Really? Oh, yeah.
Much bigger.
Yeah.
So when I went to school, we had the size of the bathroom.
Yeah.
This is.
And, you know, I seem to have managed to get through it somehow, but,
I
so they're
think
the size
really-
of a classroom.
Yeah, a lot of it is having a private office to be able to speak with a student about confidential items. You know, so we provide an office and at this point in time, and a treatment room. So we're looking at being able to combine those spaces so that it's not quite the same.
Question, I don't mean that, I'm just trying to, my mind. So when the state mandated this, how long ago was it?
It's been a while, but they call it a
It was
guideline.
an unfunded mandate, I know.
Yeah, they call it a guideline. You know, now they're backing away from it. They're saying, you know, when we designed it, we were designing it to their guidelines, so it was acceptable to them.
Did they increase their percentage in the factors of their share of school costs?
Yeah.
So they did not, so that was where I was getting to. So they demanded more square footage for something, they didn't increase their percent of allocation.
Correct. And that's what they're looking to do with this ed spec group right now, is trying to kind of right size everything. They can't be demanding and then not funding. So they're in recognition of that right now, so.
While we're on the subject of trying to peel the layers and the covers back off of this stuff, we started getting into it a year or so ago. The same thing kind of goes to the square foot per student model. They increased that. They didn't increase the funding for that either. So the recommendation on the school size, and there's some factor they use on square foot for number of students, always, everything, kind of school grew like this.
Mm-hmm.
And all that square footage, school costs are crazy today, in my mind.
Yeah, and they do, there's some things, for example, the ADA laws that came into effect. Now, of course, things now have to, you're talking about wider doors, bigger bathrooms and things like that. There's some things like that that would increase the size of the school overall.
Questions are very specific that they make these mandates to enlarge square footage. And if they did not increase their share of contribution to that, then it's all on us. Because basically an unfunded thing.
The county would
And you say both
contributing
those
more.
fall into that. Okay, thank you. You answered my question.
School furniture, that's replacement furniture for anything that's broken or for increased enrollment. Upgrade various schools, usually instructional program request. We will be looking at using the funds for FY20 for kitchen upgrades. The culinary program at Cat South really has not been touched since the building's been built. So we're excited about that project. Vehicle replacement, dump trucks, box trucks, backhoes, vans for our maintenance fleet. Aging school program, this is another state-funded program, and it's almost 100% of contribution for the state. We do elevator replacement, repairs, folding door replacements, brick repointing under this, anything that would be in backlog that we can shift to this category and get the state to pay for it, we do. But it's never really much more than $500,000 or $600,000. We'll shift anything that we can into that category to get them funded. TIMS is technology in Maryland schools, and it provides electrical upgrades to schools, increased outlets so we can get rid of some extension cords. So our project this year is Glendale Middle School. And that also is a state-funded project at 50%. And we'll be winding down with those pretty soon too. Playground equipment, we have a priority list that was developed and based on age of equipment and number of structures that the school currently has and school need, whether it's a Title I school or a free and reduced school, lunch school, things like that. So we set the priority list and we've been going through those pretty rapidly.
So would you replace a whole playground, or would you do spot kind of repairs?
Most of the time, but when we get to it, it needs replacement. Sometimes we've taken a piece or two down and they are left without something until we can get back to replace it. We have a pre-K and K smaller playground pieces, and then we have a 2 through 5 pieces. So usually a school has one or the other or both. If so, one goes down, they have something.
So when you do the pre-K programs, do you have to have the fenced area, just like a square footage, all that?
Yeah, the safety area around it, and then make sure it's fenced so they can't run away. Athletic stadiums and improvements. we use this to fund bleachers and turf replacement. And we also receive grants sometimes, and that falls into this category for our stadium upgrades. A lot of bleacher replacement or adding to, they've never had visitor bleachers.
Are we in the phase of replacing turf fields?
Oh, yeah. The early ones made it about 8 years, but the newer ones are lasting more like 10. So
It's my understanding that this accommodates basically 2 a year, replacement of 2 a year, that's the program.
And it also, we do track replacements and things like that, repairs to that. Drives and lots, that's mostly used for safety issues where we can separate the buses from the cars, parent drop-off, so that the mornings and the afternoons go a little smoother and safer.
Do you, for example, the drive on paving, do you work with, the county roads at all for any continuity or savings? Or do you have your own? You kind of do your own thing?
As far as contracting?
The cost of doing it, I mean, for the driveway, paving the driveway or paving the road, there's a lot of continuity between departments.
You use cooperative use agreements for contracting purposes. So
With county roads?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's.
And we do, they dictate what kind of sections they want for, what things will look like.
Okay.
And so this is back to where we were discussing state funding. This is the funding to date, which at 90%, they're showing $25.2 million. And they're projecting out to us that they're going to give us a total of $35.4 million. And then you can see the asterisk at the bottom. Our full request to the state was $54 million. So we're hoping that they will give us more than the 35, but that's what they're telegraphing at this point in time.
Moving forward, funded a few things.
Yes, Crofton High School was one of them.
Right. Questions?
Yeah, that's the first, that $1.1 million is the first bit of state funding for Crofton High School.
There's more to come.
Yes.
So I have could you go back to the front, question, can we go back to the front page, the one that talks about the capital budget? So there's been a lot of conversation in regards to county ask and then state ask. So when I did the calculations, these numbers are, to me, it's kind of sticker shock from my perspective until I started doing the numbers. That number represents the total ask, it's county and state.
Yes.
So for us, I know it kind of confused me because when I did the numbers for the ask from the county perspective, that's a variance between that. Like that first number is 63 million, the second one is 41 million. So for like a board to look at that, the ask is not, that number is not, there should have been like a more clear picture that you're really asking from the county perspective of 63 million, and from that recurrent piece, it's a 41 million ask, right?
Right.
And it's just kind of confusing when we're looking at it, it's like a total of 118 million. Really, it's not. It's really a lot less than that. So just kind of.
Yeah, when we do it, you provide the information to the board. We show them the breakdown of all that. Yes, you're correct.
Right.
If we had included, it would have been clearer for you all. Yeah, we
do have copies of what exhibit if you would like to see that.
No, I'm just saying for my counterparts.
We have it in Schedule 4.
Yeah, but it's not.
Schedule 4
You have
has.
Schedule 4, and you also have it in that overview that I showed you where it's, on the departmental request where I highlighted what the IAC funding was for the bottom line for the Board of Ed. That number is what can be subtracted from the 172.
So I think my biggest issue is if this goes out to public.
Yes.
So I reverse that back, not just here, but can it be conveyed from a number perspective that Here is what we're asking from the state, this one from the county, if this is gonna go out to the greater community.
Yeah, just a line underneath it.
Exactly.
Showing the difference.
Differential,
Yeah.
and wasn't.
Yeah, when we go through deliberation, we'll get into that. It'll be much more visible to all of us.
And actually,
But
the
at a
four,
high level, you're right.
there's a 4-pager
Yes.
that is on the county school's website that you actually handed out at the CIP
Yes.
oversight,
Yes.
that actually would be a good thing to provide to this,
We'll do
this
that
group.
from now on.
Yeah, and we can get it linked and put in here, it shows, it literally shows the ask, the total ask, and breaks out how much is being asked from the county and how much is being asked from the state, just as,
Break out the funding sources. Yeah, and it would, I think you're right, we should include that.
Yeah, it's the second page. Right to the second page.
For all of us. Because we have this part of the meeting at a high level, then when we get into the meat of it, when we're together, doing deliberation, we get into the details, but, it's good to see it right now.
Yep.
We're not getting a lot. Yes.
You see here your number one priority, you have health and safety. Have you always combined those? And I see a reason, but I'm concerned about, these expansive health units. And you say that it is state mandate for some of the newer things. Last year I brought this up, and looking at the thing, I find it incredible what they're doing to school health rooms, and they're becoming like medical treatment. You say it's state mandated.
It's not
Is
really
it-
mandated.
Pardon?
It's not really mandated.
Well, that's
it's a guideline,
what
but
I wanted to
Yeah.
clarify. I cannot imagine that being a state legislative mandate. Is this like a memorandum of understanding with the health department that you do cooperate on what they suggest for the health rooms, or what? Tell me how you decide that.
So it's under Comar legislation. It's under Comar legislation that health rooms are to be included in the school. And during that legislation, it also says that we need to cooperate with the local health department to determine the needs of that department. I did look up the MSDE recommended size for a health room, and right now they're saying about 750. So that's roughly a little bit smaller than a classroom. Just to clarify the health and safety priority, health rooms actually fall into a different category outside of health and safety.
I would think that's very, very well similar, but
Yeah,
should be separate, I think.
So the priority for health and safety, which is fire alarms, that's what's in the health and safety category, and that's number one. Health rooms is actually 22 or 21 rather.
In priority.
In priority order.
on that second to last page that listed the.
Wow. Yeah, I see it up here.
But the health room, the rooms is 21.
Oh, I see, the school.
Yeah, they're pulled out separately.
Oh, okay.
So
I just think, when you say it's a state mandate for the health department with Jerry, let them fund it then, because some of their requirements, having been in the school system, I think it's perfectly outrageous. I mean, that's not what schools are about. You know, you've got to provide certain kinds of things, but now it's, I just don't, I think that if they want to mandate those kinds of extravagances, that let it come from their budget.
Yep.
That would,
Or at least help significantly.
pardon?
At least help significantly.
Well,
715
absolutely.
square feet is a lot.
It's just ridiculous.
The average cost per square foot of the school, roughly, just roughly.
State contribution per square foot this year.
Well, 300
It's about three
68.
something, if I remember.
3 and change, yeah.
Yeah.
So I'll use 3 1/4. So that's over $250,000, not counting equipment and staffing
Yeah.
on a mandate. That's unfunded. And that's kind of the point.
That I
Trying to get to.
addressed this and discussed, brought up several points when, was it last year, I
Yes.
guess, on that. I think that is something that needs to be examined.
And they are
Is
working.
allowing the state health department or local to mandate or you all to agree to it, really, is, it's just, I think, unnecessary. If their children are that sick and there's no parent at home, then call the ambulance to go to the emergency room.
But the law, the directive, read that again, we're to cooperate.
Well, it's just.
No, I
The
want to hear
Comar.
what.
There is a Comar legislation I can provide this.
So it basically says, it's not a mandate, but yet, if we didn't do it,
It's a memorandum.
it'll fall it out.
We didn't do it.
So I guess in your opinion,
Don't do it.
if we was to not do that,
We'd be in violation of state legislation.
that's my point.
Yeah.
So it is a mandate.
There's a lot of
All
unfunded
right.
mandates.
Thank you.
I think this ought to be one of them that you look at.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just two quick questions. Last time I was up at Meade High School, it seemed like there was a lot of portable classrooms up there. Has that school population, is it still going through the roof, or is it leveling out?
Leveled off, but we're leaving them there because we did just get awarded a design grant from the DOD Office of Economic Development to renovate that school. So that will be a renovation in place, and we'll use that as swing space, so we didn't want to move them out.
So, will that renovation, relieve the problem?
Yes,
Classrooms?
Yes.
So it's gonna be an addition?
addition renovation, yeah, I don't know if you've been in the school, we have two entrances, one from the bay side, one from the, it's
a nightmare.
Yeah, it is. There's lots of things that need to be corrected there.
Now, what you're talking about is on Schedule 2, page 24 of 27, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it's a project titled Public School Military Installation Grant, and there's $94 million prior appropriation authority that is 100% funded through this federal grant. My understanding is that there is match requirements, but we're able to use past expenditures that we're able to document as the county match for that. Up until now, this has just been in there, waiting. We've got the authority so that they can move forward, waiting for actual funding to come from the feds.
Yeah.
What you just reported, is this new since we last met at the CIB Oversight Committee?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
okay. So I'm,
Yes,
I'm
we'll be
pleased to hear that
sending-
we're moving forward here.
Yes,
You know,
we'll be sending you the
it's
official
more than just
approval.
a wish and a dream now. It
Yeah.
looks like it's actually moving forward.
That's good. I mean, like the prevailing wage requirement, Alex, last year shared with us, it cost us 14% increase in school cost. Unbelievable amount of money, and we're not getting any more to do it. And it's not necessarily a better, builder. I mean, it's just, it just boggles my mind how these things come about. And pleased to hear there's some pushback, and there needs to be harder pushback, because I wanted to start this meeting off with a letter Kurt gave me last year that I'll bother you with it, but basically it was a letter to the town council from my counterpart in the '60s, and it was a letter with high concerns about the cost of the middle school going from 600 to 700,000. Elementary school from 600 or 700,000 to about $1.5 million because of some of these things on mandates. And he just blasted this increased cost of schools and how it is not sustainable for us as a county for runaway cost increases. This was 1965.
Something's never changed.
It was a great letter to read, and it pertains to, I think, all of us being fiscal responsible every year for all categories and to do our best to get more, he's perfect timing. So anyway, thank you for your effort. And Alex, I gotta tell you, I was sad not to see you here this year, but it went wonderfully.
We're ahead of schedule, so you can give us 15 minutes of a tap dance.
No, I apologize. I was called away unexpectedly to the General Assembly to testify for the county delegation on a different bill.
But we just finished, actually. I think we're minus questions from the board.
This is a stupid curiosity question. When you do your pre-K, do you put the bathrooms right in the classrooms?
Yep.
Okay, good.
One other question, just regarding Ripley Woods, $53 million for an elementary school. Will that be the most expensive elementary school ever built in this county?
Date, yeah, the date, yeah.
And is it the largest? At 745?
745, I think the Jessup is probably the largest at almost 800, so in that range.
We just look at a lot of these other costs for schools at 25 and 30 million, and 53 seems
Soup to nuts. It's a lot of money, and it's a budget number, so if we spent 50, then we give 3 million back to the county. It's not like we, spend up to that money, we just do what we need to, but you have to have a budget estimate.
At least when you want to talk about these issues with all this.
We did talk about,
Jerry, we do have other questions.
Jessup, just on page 24 or 27 of your schedule too, you'll see that Jessup, its total cost, $48,509,000. Again, there may be some give back in the future years.
4 or 5 years ago.
Well,
Look at health.
we're heading towards $50 million elementary school.
Hey, the rule of thumb, if you want to just keep it real basic and broad, it's 150. High school, middle school, elementary school.
I did have a question for you. So you said earlier the feasibility study for Old Mills. So right now you have it quoted for $10 million. But you also said that you were using the framework from Crofton. So how much, if you did not do that, what would be the variance between that?
A couple of percentage.
I mean, you're going to develop an economy of scale using your prototype compared to a brand new design. So, like Lisa suggested before, we know the issues that we had with the original Crofton design. We know the change orders. We can put those into the new design and allow us to have a better economy of scale with that. So.
And remember that the use of the prototype helps for the above ground element, but all the earthwork, utilities, all of that is unique to every single site. So the economies of using a prototype and a repeat design, which we're leaders of the state of using prototype designs, by the way, really influences the above ground elements, not the site civil utility elements.
So there's a feasibility for the cost, right? So you look at this, I'm mistaken, price of $10 million. So how much of that feasibility study on the back end helps with the cost, right? The construction cost. Is there a substantial amount of money that allows us to, once we do that feasibility study, does it equate to the construction cost?
And I think, Mr. Mayor can probably speak to this even better than we can, or as well. Really, it's the investment on the front end really is what saves you on the back end. So the tighter your designs are, the less potential there are for change orders, for conflicts, for anything else. So you really want to make that, if you are to, and I'm not going to say overinvest, but if you're going to overinvest in any construction project, it's going to be to make darn sure you've got the tightest set of documents on the front end, because that's going to pay dividends over the course of the next 36 plus months. That's where you have the most influences when you're first starting a project. When you're halfway through the project, now you're in a firefight, and it's too late to cost effectively deal with those issues.
Change orders are great profit for them. Great profit.
That's what we try not to let them happen.
Are we still, all the projects and their sequences, are we still tracking to the MGT study?
Yeah, we're committed to that.
So Good, and so what we see, whether they're in out years, and whatever year we end up putting them on, they are in the sequence, priority based on the MGT study. Great, that's great. It takes a lot of the, I want mine first, out of the equation, and that's very important.
And you remember we were here just a year ago and audited the library that they undertook a similar sort of master planning study, also with the help of MGT, and I'm trusting it's serving them as well as it serves us. Do you know, Mr. Pestrico, I'm sorry, but the state of Maryland has an RFP out to do a statewide facility assessment, and they're essentially the statewide solicitation that they have out basically models ours. So they took Anne Arundel County, they took our framework, and now they're deploying it statewide. That was as a result of the 21st Century Maryland State School Facility Act, was that the state undertake a study that was analogous to the one that we here locally have done successfully twice.
Well, I hope they also study what percentage of it contribute to that. 30 is not enough. We just got through talking before you walked in about health rooms and hallway sizes, everything per student, square footage of the school, prevailing wage, all the mandates. I would call them mandates. They would call them under some whatever. At the end of the day, it's mandates. But they didn't increase their funding percent at all to cover any of it. So hopefully that gets studied in the same process.
And I'm sure Ms. Crawford indicated before, there is a statewide work group that's underway, and they're supposed to deliver the work product by the end of June 2019. Hopefully that will help them. I mean, there is a recognition, and there was a recognition when the statewide task force went through that large study, that the guidelines there's been scope creep in the guidelines, but the funding levels weren't commensurate with that, and things sort of got out of calibration. So the state clearly knows that they need to bring those things in, try to revisit their guidelines to see if they can be curtailed some. That's one.
Sure,
but make sure that the funding is in alignment with whatever the requirements are.
Yeah, we've all seen in the press that the state is preparing more capital for schools, but at the end of the day, financially, most counties, for every dollar the state pitches, the county has to indent too.
That's where you are. Somerset puts 10 cents in on a dollar, and we put in 70.
In order to grab it, you have to indent yourself more, and that's not necessarily a good choice. So it's kind of a bait and switch type of thing.
Well, we do that, as they may have indicated earlier, but we run that math and we communicate with the budget office. There actually have been projects that we've foregone the state monies because the burden of complying with all the state mandates in exchange for, in some cases, some meager funding weren't worth it. We've actually bid projects both ways, with and without, and if the economics works, that foregoing their modest increment still puts us in a positive cash position. We've actually walked away from the state money and said, no, thank you, keep it, we can do it better ourselves.
I'm glad that task force is full speed. Questions, board? Well, ladies and gentlemen, we made it through the school presentation. And it's always dear to everybody's heart about our schools. So I want to thank all of you for what you do for us in the county. And we do have a great school system. It'll always be made greater, but it's a great school system.
While we have, I'm not suggesting we necessarily expand the work to fill this time, but the presentation was focused on the FY20 requests, okay? And we, as you all know, we deal with the 6-year program in terms of the recommendations. And I know that you were able to share in an earlier meeting plans for the old mill complex. Is that something that you'd be at all comfortable with kind of running through with this group in terms of the out year? Something I think you actually might have the PowerPoint hands. Yeah, the sequencing of the old mill.
It's a 10-year run.
Right.
Yeah, it just
longer than that by the time the last project delivery will actually be slightly
And
longer.
if you look at, you'll be able to put our dollars to it on page 22 and 23 and 27. You'll see the projects that they're gonna run through here in this show. And what's on 22 and 23, the highlighted numbers are the time frame of the board's request. And you see all those zeros above those numbers, that's what's in the currently approved program. So you can see how, and oftentimes what we do is our first exercise is push it back all out, consistent with the program because of the funding situation that we have. But we need to know what your plan is, and that's what I think it would be helpful for them to see the sequencing here for that out here stuff.
Thank you. You want to go through it? Or?
Yeah, I think what would it take?
Yeah,
10 minutes maybe? Yeah, not even 10 minutes. And I think it would be helpful for your decision making in the out years.
Yeah, but before I forget, because I will, you told me in another meeting, what's the acres needed for an elementary school, middle school, and high school today?
Nowadays,
What are you looking for?
Ideally, we're looking for about 20 acres for an elementary school, upwards of 40 acres for middle school, and upwards of 50 acres for high school. Now, we'll say that's not driven because we're building larger structures. It's because of the forest conservation set aside, the water quality and quantity retention activities, the green space calculations, et cetera. So our buildings aren't fundamentally bigger, our parking lots aren't fundamentally bigger. We need more land to be able to set aside mathematically the right amount of environmental zones.
Because it played into this, so that's what I just want to get that on the big. Thank you.
So, if you don't mind me standing, the large group, the large purple area in between, and diving through the middle, that is that noise zone, the MAA BAZA noise zone, and you can see that we've got portions of Rippling Woods and Old Mill, and much of the Old Mill land and much of the elementary school land is all inside of that noise zone. And so we looked at the options of obviously how can we best undertake these 7 projects and yet stay outside of the noise zone, which essentially would preclude us from building in it, or it would be so exorbitantly expensive that would make the projects unfeasible. So this is the position of where we are today. As you know, we've got the large Old Mill complex, which is a high school, middle school, and middle school all under one roof, almost 5,000 kids under one roof, open floor plan, no walls subdividing the rooms. I'm not sure who thought this was a wonderful idea back in the 70s, but they did, errantly so. It was actually at one time, as far as we know, the largest school east of the Mississippi, public school under one roof. We've got existing Rippling Woods Elementary School, and then far off in the upper corner, we have Porterfield Elementary School and our Center of Applied Technology, which is our VOTEC school. We've got 2 in the county, 1 in Edgewater, and 1 up here in Suffolk. So the project that we have envisioned basically took a look at those existing schools and figured out how could we best deliver all 7 projects, keeping in mind we have nowhere to relocate these youngsters. So we don't have holding schools, not like Montgomery County, some other schools, that have vacant schools sitting out there. We can just move the youngsters around, reconstruct these buildings. We have to deal with them essentially in place. So the first project in the upper right-hand side is Porterfield Elementary School. I can switch sides here. It's a little hard to see, but you can see the gray shaded building is the existing building. The feasibility study will confirm this, but verified that we can build a prototype elementary school here on the same piece of property, a multi-structure building, so we're going up. That shrinks the footprint, shrinks our environmental impact, while still maintaining that existing school. Once the new school's built, the youngsters move over into the new prototype school, the old school's demolished, and we essentially flip the property. So where the building sits today will become the fields, the parking lots, everything there. The second project that we would deliver is over on this side, and it's Rippling Woods Elementary School, same situation. As you can see, Rippling Woods is 100% inside of the flight zone. We were fortunate enough that to the east side, we do have land that we can build, again, a prototype school. Outside of the noise preclusion zone, again, stand up that school, multi-story school to shrink its environmental footprint, It's a much more efficient sort of circular design. It's always cheaper to go up basically than out nowadays with all the environmental impacts. Keep the youngsters in their school. Both Quarterfield and Rippling are also open floor plan. There's no walls. So you go into those pods and you can have 6, 8 classrooms in an open space that's kind of like this, just with some fabric covered partitions subdividing the spaces. So we would deliver the Rippling Woods School and occupy that. The third school we would deliver would be ground up construction, so greenfield development. This would be, currently we're calling it Old Mill West, just because it's west. So it's west of 97. It's on the land that you and I may know today as Papa John's Farm. It also would be a prototype. We would design a high school that would be built here. Eventually, it's going to be a replica of the other high school, because remember, prototypes save us on design fees, etc. So we would ground up construct the school on the Papa John's Farm property. That would be the third delivery. The fourth delivery would be over here. This is a piece of property called Southgate Park. And I'm sorry, let me back up for a second. The Papa John's property was purchased by the county. Anne Arundel County government owns that land today. It's deeded to them. Once we need it for construction, they will deed it over to us and we'll build on it. Conversely, Southgate Park, this is property that the Board of Ed had purchased and owned years ago. Knowing we didn't need to build on it, we deeded it over to the county. They've used it as a park now for many, many, many years. And you know, Rec and Parks and us work collaboratively. We co-locate, we share each other's fields, gyms, multi-purpose spaces, etc. So when the time comes, after many, many years, the county will deed the project back over to us, but not just here at Southgate Park. You'll see we'll be able to preserve many of the rec elements that Rec and Park already has there. Plus, we're going to be building our own. So remember, once the school's built, Rec and Parks today doesn't have 2 fields there. They don't have baseball. They don't have softball. They don't have a gym. You know, once we're done using this facility at 430, they got open access to all of that. So we're going to preserve as much as what they already have, and then they'll jointly share with us the remaining elements of that school. So that'll be the fourth project we'll deliver. The fifth project we'll deliver is the replacement school for our Center of Applied Technology. So our North Votech School, which currently exists up here on the other side of Spalding, will be relocated on the high school property outside of the noise zone. But again, within walking distance eventually of the high school, so there are synergies between the CAT centers and the high school. Outside of the noise zone on our property doesn't require any land acquisition. Once we deliver that project, that will set us up to be able to construct the other prototype high school down here on the remaining elements of our Old Mill project, again outside of the noise zone. I will point out that the existing high school as it sits today does have a stadium. We've talked to the county and Rec and Parks. The existing stadium we're conveying to Rec and Parks. So Mr. Anthony of Rec and Parks will take full control over that existing stadium. It's got bathrooms, it's got concessions. They'll totally manage that. We will have a stadium closer to our new building. Again, through a joint use agreement, Mr. Anthony and Rec and Parks is going to be using our synthetic turf fields, our gyms, our fields after hours anyway, just like they would anyway. But again, they will have another stadium facility with the synthetic turf that they can actually use even during the day, you know, maybe for adult leagues or competitions or something else that they wish. And then the final project that we'll deliver is the second middle school. And the second middle school will sit where today the CAT, our vocational center. So we have to build the vocational center over here that will allow us to then demolish that old Votech Center that's already well north of 50 years old and put a modern day career technology. And we all know that the Votech programs, we call them CTE or career technology education, I mean, there's a huge, huge clamor for them, not just with our students, but the business community is, you know, beseeching us to please produce more of our youngsters that can go into the trades, that can work with their hands, that can do some of those skills. And you may or may not know it, but most of those youngsters, when they leave those programs, actually already have a certificate. So they've already passed the welding exam, they've already passed the cosmetology exam, they've already received the ASC certification that they can go work on diesel mechanic vehicles or even regular pedestrian vehicles. So we not just arm them with the skills, we put the piece of paper in their pockets that makes them marketable and essentially immediately employable. The second thing I'll tell you is that unlike math and history and art, where we are the subject matter experts, we are not. In CTE, you will be amazed, and I would love to have you come up to either of those facilities. The business partners come in. So right there on 100, if you ever drive by it, Cummins has a ginormous plant where they work on diesels, where they work on generators, etc. They're instructors. Or Mr. McCaffrey was just up there with Trane, right? With Trane, similarly in the HVAC shop, the industry comes in, they donate their products. It's to Caterpillar's benefit to bring their motors into our building. Their service mechanics and managers train their students. Guess what? That youngster walks right up, goes right out of Route 100, and is plug-in ready to work for Trane or Caterpillar or anybody else there. So there's symbiotic relationships between us and the industry, and every one of those has a industry advisory board that tells us what we should be teaching, what the syllabus elements should be, and again, their instructors are embedded and work side by side with our faculty members to give them the skills, get them ready for that national test, whichever one it is that they're going to pass, and then honestly, as soon as they walk across our stage, they scoop them up. We cannot produce those cat kids quickly enough to satisfy the business industry here in this county. So we really look forward to having a more modern facility. That design of that facility, we will be working with industry on. They'll be part of our advisory committee, making sure that that facility can support the kind of instruction and programs that the business and commercial community think they need for the next 50 years.
Great. So I have a question. The percentile of repurposed land is what, 98%?
Right. The only acquisition that was done was the Papa John's farm property. All the other properties were in the public portfolio, either ours or the one property that was ours we gave to Rec and Parks, and they're going to give it back.
So that's the only one, right? That's what I was saying, like 98%. So that most of the buildings will be destroyed and rebuilt over.
Yes.
And then the stadium is the only one that will be existing that will be repurposed. Right?
On purpose, correct.
On purpose, right.
Right. We've also had conversations with the library. I know the library, not to go off track, you'll see them later.
I was just going to ask you to before you leave this map, point out the library.
Yeah, so the library is,
second one.
The library's doing a Glen Burnie South. I mean, they want to do a Glen Burnie North, Glen Burnie South. We've already had conversations with them over in Old Mill, coming in off Shetlands Lane, coming in off the backside. There's going to be land out there. We think it's sufficient should the county wish to partner with us. We would want to master plan that whole site so that we can make sure that it accommodates the Board of Ed requirement, Rec and Park requirements, and if the library wants to go there, the library requirements as well. It would preclude the county from having to acquire land, and land is very expensive
Keeps costs
nowadays.
down. They talked to us last year about taking the Glen Burnie existing and splitting it, so they don't have to enlarge the current Glen Burnie. So
There's a lot.
They just didn't have a location last year.
Yeah, there's a lot of construction. I mean, we, as Kurt's alluded to, and DPW, we want to be great partners with the county. If we already own the land, why not? We've given, Eastern District Police Station sitting on land that we own, we gave to the county. The fire station at Marley is a land that we own. We gave them 7 acres. They built a fire station without having to buy land. So anytime we can do that, we want to do that. We're all in this together.
Crossover projects here, while we're on that subject. Advanced Land was used, General County Advanced Land Project was used for the $14 million purchase of the Papa John's property a couple of years ago.
For 2 years, I think we settled, or you settled 2 years ago now.
And we have that advanced land account, and there is a proposal that will be going on. I don't even know what's going to speak to it right now, but the idea presently is to maintain funding in that advanced land project to facilitate 2 potential down the road site locations for 2 elementary schools. To those 2 elementary school site needs.
Sure. So, I mean, I'll speak to schools because it's parochial, but I will tell you, that we have an issue here in the county, in my estimation, that we, the public, don't have enough land to meet our needs going forward because of growth and development, et cetera. We partnered with Recreation and Parks. We had a master plan, they had a master plan. We actually worked together and overlaid our master plans on top of each other because, again, we co-locate. Right? So we overlaid our master plans over top of each other so that if we're going to buy a piece of property, to the extent possible, to buy a piece of property that meets both of our needs. So that's the first piece of it. But we do have a couple, very few properties that are remaining that we own that aren't built on. But we're faced with a situation that there are parts of the county, such as Crofton and Gambrels, for example, and Watchapel, that are just exploding with growth and development. We don't own any property there. Another example is out on Marley Neck Boulevard, where we've got two elementary schools out on that long peninsula, one at each end. We've got Marley Elementary School on the bottom of the peninsula. We've got Sally Elementary School at the top of the peninsula. But both schools are projected to have in excess of 1,100 students at both schools in just a few years. And the schools were only built for 700. We've already added on to Marley Elementary twice. We can't do it anymore. We're landlocked. We're pushed out to our property line. Sally Elementary School, we're currently putting our second and last edition. Again, we're pushed out to our property line. So we're done with the easy solutions. The buildings are as big as they can be, and again, both schools are going to be over 1,100 kids in just a couple more years. The only solution is to buy a piece of property that's in between those two schools, create a new school, and then redistrict the entire Marley Neck Peninsula to better balance it out. Because you asked me earlier the size of the parcels. When we need land, it's an acre and a half is not going to do it. And the amount of larger undeveloped parcels that can be developed that potentially have public utilities, I mean, they're getting gobbled up as we speak. You just have to pick up and down the road and see what's going on. So the amount of those parcels is just diminishing, month over month. So we've been working with the administration prior, and we're working with the current. We've already met with the current administration, the CAO, the county exec, and others, to say collectively as a group, DPW, Rec and Parks, Board of Ed, Public Safety, we really need to get our act together and then identify and either put contracts, either acquire or at least put contracts, contingency contracts on some of those large land parcels. Because if we wait until we're ready to build that fire station, or we wait until we're ready to build that school or that library, it's going to be gone. So it's kind of like...
So that fund's done.
Right. So that's specifically, there's two elementary schools in the program, in the out years of the program. There's a West County Elementary School and a Mountain Road Elementary School.
The Mountain Road Elementary School is in Farmington. That one we currently do own that property.
So you have the property for that.
Right.
So...
And then there's going to be right behind that, there's going to be a North County Elementary School. That's going to be that Sally Marley School.
Right.
And then we have a West County High School, which is the third project. So the western part, if you drive out 100 or out or 32, you know what's happening. 198, what's happening out in the Meade area, whatever. I mean, we purposely, through the GDP, we said that was going to be our Gold Coast, right, our concentrated growth area, and it's now working. It is now working. Unfortunately, we don't have a school count there to absorb that. So we've been trying to put additions on, et cetera. So we're working on a third piece of property that, if you can draw an imaginary line, if you have 32 and 100, you sort of have Telegraph Road that connects 32 and 100. Somewhere along that spine, so let's just, in your head, picture Telegraph Road. We're going to need to do a land acquisition. There is a park there that's already owned by Rec and Parks. It's been used for many, many years. There's a parcel for sale, about 16-acre parcel that adjoins the park. Their property lines meet with ours. And we've been working with Economic Development, Rec and Parks, DPW, and others to look at seeing could we acquire that, add the new 16 acres to the existing large park. I think the park is already 60-something acres as it is today, plus another 16. We would work with Rec and Parks and the county and DPW to remaster plan that entire now larger parcel so that it can accommodate a secondary school but still completely fulfill all the Rec and Park requirements that they need there as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much. Any questions?
Like a true bureaucrat, that space got expanded and consumed, so we gotta move on.
We are now just 3 minutes behind.
Right.
All you gotta do is
Like today.
either Kurt or Alex
I'll
speak
find a way
and
to
just get
expand.
sucked up, right?
Did you do the ejection
Thank you.
of it? Sandy, eject it so it'll be safely removed.
Thank you all.
Yeah. Well, try. Safe to remove. Follow the rules. Follow the rules on March.
Next. Next.
Next. Hello, how are you?
Good, how are you? Good to see you again. Joe just suggested we change our horse name to Shark Tank.
Which thing do you want to fund?
Well, we gotta be careful what we say because we are being videos, so.
Very exciting.
Which is a good thing there. Now time.
15 copies, 3
All right.
Just to orient you.
Everybody's here?
Yep.
Your staff is here? Great, welcome.
Christine has a presentation that's gonna come around to you, and in addition to that, let me just orient you to where we are on Schedule 2. So on Schedule 2, the projects she's gonna speak to are on page 1 of 27, and in the project class overview package, you want to be looking at page 2 and 3, mostly page 3, where the unfunded requests are shown. I think she's going to address those at the end of the presentation.
Floor is yours.
All right, thank you. Welcome. I'm Christine Romans. I'm the Director of Central Services. I did bring a couple of staff with me. Deputy Director Nancy Noonan is back there, as well as Beth Levis. She's the brains behind the operation. I'll go ahead and just flip through the slide presentation that I brought, but certainly stop and ask any questions that you may have. Just to remind the committee and anyone who is new, the mission of Central Services is we essentially are the behind-the-scenes support services for county government. So we support the maintenance function for all county buildings. We operate the purchasing system, all facilities and properties, as well as fleets. We also have a risk management and safety program, and ensure that our services are delivered as efficiently as possible. Central Services maintains 274 buildings and 3.2 million square feet, 102 boilers, 48 elevators, 11 miles of median, over 2,000 vehicles, 700 various pieces of equipment. I say all of that because, again, we're not the interesting ones. You're hearing presentations from folks who, lock up bad guys and fight fires, but we fix their vehicles and we buy the new ones, and we try to keep the heat on in the fire stations. So. The first project we'll talk about is C-443500 facility renovation and relocation. This is a sum of funds typically funded at $650,000. It is exactly what it sounds like, facility renovations, and if anybody needs to move offices. We do ask tenants in the departments every year what kinds of things would they like to see. This year we got a list of $1.4 million of requests, and if you turn to slides 5 and 6 in the presentation, this is the list totaling $650,000 that we have put together from those requests. As you can see, it's things like replacing carpet, replacing doors, fixing stairwell treads, renovating buildings, the things that make the buildings more comfortable for the people using them. This is the list we expect to do, but things do change throughout the fiscal year. Any questions on that project?
Well, I'll give a board a moment to look through
Sure.
the list. He's got a question at the end.
So basically what Schedule 2 shows you is that the ask is for $650,000 a year, which is consistent with the program. And this list that is represented on pages 5 and 6 is the current plan for expending that ask of $650 in fiscal 20.
So, what did the one for?
Again, those are from the departments, that's what they asked for.
Oh, asked, okay.
Yep. And we went through that list and either tried to accommodate the things that we could, or goes on to a backlog list, anything that we couldn't, and it didn't fit the 650.
That's the other. The unfunded list.
Yeah. Okay, then the next project on page 7 is C537800, County Facilities and Systems Upgrades. This is more the guts and the works of the buildings, everything roof from roofs to HVAC systems, electrical systems, plumbing. Previous years we were funded at 5.2 million, 5.3 roughly. Again, we have prioritized our list. It includes all the things noted there. And if you turn to page 8, you'll see the list for fiscal 20. A portion of the funds at the top, if they already have a C5378 number, that's a project that was from a previous year and it needs additional funds to finish up and it's rolling forward. And then the items that are prioritized 1 through 7 are the new things that we want to do out of this fund source this year. You'll see number 1 is $2 million. That's we're replacing multiple roofs around the county. We're doing the best we can in terms of patching, but at some point we can't chase the patches anymore. It just needs a new roof. So these roofs are the ones that are the most important. Then we are looking to do some electrical upgrades. We need to identify some HVAC chillers that need to be replaced. The backflow preventer installation at the Senior Center in Pascal. The police evidence lab may just need some additional work done there to make it a more functional space. If you've ever been to the health department bridge going into their main building, that needs some significant work. And then we have a lot of buildings around the county that are just falling apart, but they're still standing there. We need to take them down for safety reasons. So that right there totals $5.3 million that we've asked for.
That police evidence lab, 140, that's for the new facility.
No, it's actually their existing facility because I don't know if it's actually funded in fiscal 20.
I thought that was moving.
Is it moving in fiscal 20? Oh, CID? That's a separate groups.
Well, this
Criminal
is not the
Investigation
same.
Division is not the police evidence lab. Those are two separate functions.
That's the one that's going behind the current
the police
headquarters?
yes. That's where it is today, and I believe there is a longer term proposal for some sort of new crime lab, new evidence storage.
Yeah, but
Right,
that's longer
which is,
term.
It is longer
which is
term.
what this is.
Correct.
So this is,
This is specifically in the evidence lab where they process either DNA or other evidence as it comes from crime scenes. They need some additional
well, I
work
guess
done
the
in
point
there.
is there's $150,000 going into this facility that will probably move
Longer term,
hopefully
yes.
in a couple of years.
That's always the push-pull with any of my projects,
Right.
exactly that. When is the right time to do it? And at some point, you can't wait anymore. And you have to make the space more functional, particularly in something like this where they're trying to prosecute crime.
But just as Christine said, this is subject to change, and in the next 6 to 7 months, we may have a better idea where we stand with that next group. This would drop off, and she would just take the next thing on the list.
I just want to make sure we're talking about the same thing.
I actually received a request of over $10 million for this fund. So yes, if this 150 doesn't need to be spent, there's a long waiting list of things I can pull from to plan. Absolutely. The next project for Central Services is C5717 Parking Garage Repair and Renovation. We use this project to repair the 2 county-owned parking garages, Whitmore Garage in Annapolis and the Glen Burnie Garage next to the courthouse in Glen Burnie. At Whitmore, it needs some concrete repairs, some waterproofing of the joints, exposed steel that we need to repair, and it needs some cables and some drains. We do have some water damage there. In Glen Burnie, we have a water infiltration problem that we need to address. Again, concrete repairs, exposed rebar, and there was a minor increase in design costs related to this program.
I'm trying to find
Yeah, this.
Oh, sorry. 5717.
We don't have this one. Yeah, we have to go back to our.
I'm sorry?
We have to go back to our list. Or schedule two.
The parking garage, yeah, schedule two, it's
Top of the page.
parking garage repair, it's in the middle of the page. But there's a $702,000, increase cost request in fiscal 20. Are you not following? It looks like you're not on it. Page 1 of 27 of schedule 2. You're on page 1 of, yeah, page 1 of 27 of schedule 2. Halfway down, parking garage is repaired. And I've got the schedule 4 detail up on the screen behind Christine. And she's reading from a presentation that apparently, I thought the presentation was gonna be handed out, but what was handed out to you are just, it's just the project lists, I think is all that's going to.
The presentation's in there.
We're on the same. We're with you.
I've handed out lists.
Yeah, all that's gone around is the list,
Okay,
not
sorry
the
about that.
presentation.
I
And I
thought-
can't show two things on the screen at the same
You
time.
can't see the screen.
Or I
Gotcha.
probably could, I just don't know
My
how.
apologies.
I think we're there.
Okay.
So, yes, you can follow along on Schedule 2. I'm just trying to give more detail as to each of the projects. All right, so 5719, the fire equipment maintenance facility. This was a project that has been previously approved. Fiscal 20 money would be for the design of a new fire apparatus maintenance garage and also to provide some space for the Police Special Operations Division. This is at the facility up at 7409 Baltimore Annapolis Boulevard. Any of you know that? It's behind the Ice House. It's county-owned property, and we have a small maintenance operation up there right now where we maintain county trucks. All fire apparatus are worked on at the Millersville facility, and the facility there is antiquated. It's too small. We actually have to work on some of the fire apparatus outdoors, which is a problem in the winter and rainy days, things like that. So a new facility would be constructed up at that vacant property to basically provide for a much better, much more enhanced way of maintaining all the fire apparatus. Construction funds are planned then for fiscal 21 and 22. So that's what this project is. It's just moving the existing fire shop to another location.
And it's shown on page 1 of 27, that's consistent with the approved program.
Another project that was previously approved and it looks like the funding has just moved out is 1 year, is 5718, the Millersville garage expansion. As I mentioned, once the fire shop moves, the antiquated, aged facility that remains, we would like to renovate that as well as the rest of the Millersville garage. There's actually 2 halves to that Millersville garage, the fire shop currently and then what we call the car shop, where we work on the majority of the police vehicles in the county, but other vehicles as well. Both sides need to be repaired and renovated. It's approaching 40 years old. If we're no longer going to be needing to repair fire vehicles there, we can then take on larger trucks there, and they will fit in that facility just fine. So we would like to be able to repair that. There was an increase in current cost estimates and escalation, which is why you see a dollar value increase there, and then the project slides out a year, which can be fine. All right, then I believe you also wanted to hear about unfunded requests, things that we asked for that didn't fit in the program at this point. Highlights. Okay, so we have 3 things to talk about. 2 of them are discrete projects, and then 1 is just the unfunded list. The first one is a secure mail processing facility. This comes to light periodically, most recently with the pipe bombs that were mailed to government officials. That got us thinking that we really don't process our mail in the most secure way. Currently, we really don't have any screening beyond what the U.S. Postal Service might do at their own facilities before it comes to us. So we would look for building a facility somewhere where all incoming mail to county buildings would be screened for whatever, and then would be delivered from that point out to the more, the 200 plus county buildings.
Would that be redundant? Because all the post office distribution centers have all the latest screening stuff.
And yet pipe bombs were still mailed to government officials. Things do get missed.
Through the U.S. mail, or did they? So, I mean, I hear what you're saying, but should that be fixed by us, or should they do some upgrade? Yeah, I mean, whose nickel is that shit? Because they're supposed to be doing that to U.S. mail nationwide. So if they're not.
I don't disagree with you, but
if they
that's
have a
fine
project
until a
that's not up
local
to date.
official is harmed by something, or a county employee.
No, I understand.
Yeah. So we actually run 2 mail facilities right now where mail comes into the county system, either at the Arundel Center or at the Heritage Complex. And we would remove both of those, centralize them, and use the space in both of those buildings as more of a transfer distribution facility. and have our own screening process. I will say that the U.S. Postal Service does this, but then the U.S. government also has their own screening operation behind the U.S. Postal Service. So every agency as well. So yeah. The next project for your consideration is something called Community Center Building Rehabilitation 003720. The county, and with the assistance, large assistance from the Arundel Community Development Services Corporation, they, many years ago, helped build 4 community centers around the county. They are operated by nonprofits. The majority of those community centers are failing and in need of some major infrastructure upgrades. What this project would allow us to do is to work with those nonprofits, get the facilities kind of back up to a shape where they can be more readily used, and work with the nonprofit to determine, are they going to stay in that facility and operate it going forward, or should they disband and the county then decide what to do with the building. And then finally, the list, I believe this is handed out, the unfunded requests, project requests, Beth?
15, it's the list 15, 16, and 17. The longer list.
May I recommend going forward that we also include the projected cost for the unfunded?
Okay, we certainly could do that.
So we know what we're talking about.
All right, this is roughly $8 million.
All right, thanks.
Are these in order of priority?
Yes, we have done a couple of passes at priority, but I will say things do change depending on what comes up, what goes bump in the night. But yes. Happy to talk about any of them, but they're the kinds of things that some of them are interesting and some of them are just, you know, the kinds of things that you don't really need to think about, but they do need to happen in order for the county facilities to remain efficient.
And again, kind of alluding back to my opening comments on this concept of the unfunded requests being one of providing you with supplementary information to the actual departmental requests that Christine spoke to earlier. Those are the actionable items before you. This is heads up, long term, this is out there. We don't want it to be lost because it's not part of the specific request before you. So we want it.
Well, you guys start in November with the budget, so this is what got scrubbed by your own process and prioritization.
And certainly to the extent that you see these things that we brought to your attention that you think, you know, need to be maybe moved up or something, you can refer to that in your letter and so forth, and this is just giving you information for doing that.
That's why the price tag, each one of those could be helpful too. And I mean, every year we faced scrubbing out $700 to $800 million from the request as a whole down to $4 billion. So yeah, we understand the scrub list. It's good to see the list now. So that was a good move.
So quick question on just in general, the unfunded things. I know you guys described it, but in consideration to like some of this stuff like garage door, does that not get in consideration to the department itself to say, hey, I have a general fund, this door may cost $100,000, I then take it versus trying to make it.
So the system the county operates is a centralized system of providing facilities maintenance. If an issue comes up where it's impacting their operations day to day, I look at how much money do I have right now that I could address something like that? Does the agency have anything? But for them, it comes out of their operating funds, and if they didn't plan to spend it, they're not going to have $100,000 sitting around either. And I will say the needs are so great that every year, very good projects that should be done can't be done due to affordability.
Yeah, coming from a business environment that goes through the same process, when you ask for what everybody wants, there's always this list. A list, careful what you ask for. I'm not saying they're not issues. I'm not even beginning to say that. It's just you do have to draw a line.
And I'll caution all of you, we've kept the knucklehead stuff off that list.
I know what you've done, and I compliment you with your work.
We've kept the knucklehead stuff off of this, but it's still true that it's an unfunded list does not necessarily equate to a true formal backlog. either,
Correct.
you know,
Well, I
so,
would
so,
disagree
yeah.
with that. I'm sorry.
Well, I mean, and we have internal discussions along.
These are projects that have to happen eventually, but I recognize for affordability, it's not gonna be fiscal
The
20.
discussion doesn't happen in the vacuum. I appreciate it. I know you work with other folks, so. But it's good to see the lift and the spirit of openness. It's the first time we've seen what did it to us, so I appreciate that a lot. Additional questions from the board?
The community centers that you mentioned, you said there's 4 of them. Could you just throw out, like, I'm not familiar with those.
Sure.
Like,
The first one is
operators or-
Ralph Bunch down in Shadyside Edgewater. That is South County. The second one is Lloyd Keyser. It's up in Brooklyn, Humphrey area. The third one is Lula G. Scott. That's the one in Shadyside. And then the fourth one is called Queenstown, which is actually in Sever.
And just so that you know, the virtual binder that you all have that's out on the website right now, if you click on the bookmark for Central Services, the presentation that includes that list is there for you. So you don't have to take the notes on that. You can just go to her chart.
So those are the 4, and as I said, nonprofits run them. They were set up with some grant funds from the Arundel Community Development Services Corporation originally to, to be self-sustaining, to have a way of funding their own infrastructure. We are, and it's actually, we've been sort of, they're on their own, but we've gone out and done an assessment, and we need to do a more detailed assessment of these, and there are needs there at each of these, either roofs or plumbing or electrical, things like that, so.
The seniors centers are different.
Completely different, yeah. The senior centers are operated by the county. The funding that we talked about, the 2 funds, 4435 and 5378, include senior center projects. These are operated as community centers and operated by nonprofits.
What would be an operator of these?
They're nonprofits. I think one of them, like the Lloyd Keyser LLC. Yeah,
that's the name of it?
That's the name of it. And each group has typically they rent space out. That's how they get some operating income. There's a Boys and Girls Club that operates, I think, out of Keyser, actually in Brooklyn. That's how they get some operating income. So these groups are trying to be self-sustaining. With some of them are more successful than others, and so they can't really fund the infrastructure needs of their buildings, and they are county buildings.
Well, I, for one, know you perform a lot of magic. This sort of
It's getting harder. Well, we work very closely with the Department of Public Works as well, so.
Last questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good to see you again.
Take your time.
Well, we have arrived at lunch.
I didn't know I was
I'd like to, this break for lunch, returning at 1 o'clock. There's a sandwich shop I go to. There's a sandwich shop on the corner
So you get all the money you want.
They go there to eat.
It's just my phone.
That's
You know, I've never even used this camera before, so I'm not even sure.
How are you?
Just so you know, we're the only, I'm the only person watching the which is really frustrating. Nobody's watching.
Yeah, okay.
Me and my guys in the studio have done it. There's only 2 people watching it. Let's see.
Okay, so you decided.